Aha. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Okay, thanks.
Alderman Braithwaite. Here. Alderman Nguyen. Here. Alderman Wilson. Here. Alderman Holmes. Here. Alderman Tendam. Here. Alderman Grover. Alderman Rainey. Here. Alderman Burris. Here. Alderman Fisk. Here. We have a quorum.
We have a quorum. Welcome to the Tuesday, September 18th, 2012 meeting of the Evanston City Council. First item is the mayor's public announcements. I have none. City Manager, do you have announcements?
Yes, Madam Mayor, members of the council, good evening. Greg Kleiber, our fire chief, is here to remind the community about an upcoming event.
Thank you, Mayor Tisdall, Deputy Clerk Altwell, and members of the City Council. Greg Kleiber, fire chief. Before you have some information on our Fire Explorer program that will be starting this fall. We're going to have an open house Tuesday evening, the 25th, at our headquarters at 909 Lake Street at 7 p.m. to explain what this is and what this program is all about. The purpose of the program is for those youths that are between 14 and 20 years old who may be interested in becoming a firefighter with the City of Evanston. This is an initiative that was one of my priorities this year, and we will be starting that this year in the hopes of engaging our youth between those ages and hopefully having them become interested in this career and as a profession that they can pursue. We will be utilizing our firefighters as lead instructors. They're going to learn everything there is to know about this career opportunity, what our job is about, both as firefighters and paramedics, all operations of our department, hands-on experience, and we're going to make this enjoyable for them. It'll kind of mirror the school year, so it'll starting a little late this year, but we'll get started in October and run through the end of the school year. So that is, there'll be a minimal cost to it, about $20, and that's about the extent of the expenses for the program itself. I'd be glad to answer any questions if anybody has any.
It looks terrific. Alderman Grover?
I'm assuming, Chief Kleiber, that you'll be advertising this at the high school, our middle schools, to capture some of the 14-year-olds in 8th grade.
Yeah, we have had some of our firefighters who are, we formed a public education team this year. We have about 16 of our firefighters on that team. They've been out in the community blitzing and hitting the high schools and our middle schools as well, because there's 14 to 20. So the high school, the YMCA, YWCA, it's a co-ed program, incidentally. And we have four firefighters who are women on the job right now, so just want to make sure everybody knew that. So.
Great, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
And that concludes my announcements, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. City Clerk, do you have communications?
None at this time.
Excellent. Moving right along. Next on the agenda is citizen comment. The first two speakers are Junad Rizki and Mike Vasilko.
Last year, the City Council participated in a cover-up of the tax increase. The Council and City staff created an environment of confusing and misleading information on the real tax increase, which was close to 8%, 5%, almost 5% property and 3% other taxes. At no point during the process of the budget discussion, Wally ever stated the total tax increase. Several local newspapers outlets basically informed the public it was 3%, so there was true confusion. Tonight, the Council will engage in the same practice, no doubt, when it talks about pensions. The Mayor and Council will claim it's only a 2% increase for pensions, but the truth, what will be the real total tax increase? It won't be 2%. I believe the council members and mayors know right now what the tax increase is, because Wally's probably told you, which I realize might be a violation of certain things, but you probably know anyway. So you will play out the same things as you did last year. The fiscal house of cards here is crumbling. I noticed in the firefighters' increased salary of 2%, just in that one alone, I'm sure in the other ones, funding is going to come from taxes and water bills. Basically, it said the water fund, which is water bills. Anyone get the impression the city might raise water rates again? Wally, you've really not solved the structural problems of the budget. You're really engaged in what I would call a shell game, since the city's financial picture really may still be deteriorating. Few here probably understood several months ago, maybe a little longer, an ordinance was passed that allowed the city manager to move funds around. To me, that's really what's going on here. It's time for some honest leadership here with integrity, not continuing telling us half-truths. Tell us the tax increase tonight if you want to discuss pensions and discuss a 2% pension increase. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike Fasulko, 2728 Reese Avenue, Evanston. I read recently in both the Roundtable and the Pioneer Press about an article published that documents a conversation of the last council meeting, specifically regarding the pension fund debt and the suggestion of raising property taxes yet again. The article also states that the actuary's recommendation of the amount the city would pay to the pension fund would not require a property tax increase. Some council members desire to pay more towards the pension fund and raise property taxes. So I did write a note to the council stating my personal, and I think I probably speak for a lot of people who aren't here tonight, that we should not raise property taxes. We should not raise any taxes or fees again in 2013 as we have in the last several years. What I do recommend is that the City Council goals and the budget goals for 2013 should include avoiding raising taxes, or better yet, trying to find a way to decrease taxes. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Young, did you want to speak now? We have 15 minutes for citizen comment. With this number of speakers, you can have more than 3 minutes.
Good evening. My name is Jim Young, and I live at 2607 Colfax Street. I would like to thank you for giving me the opportunity to address City Council this evening, and thank you, Mayor Tisdale, for giving me a little extra time. Some of you may recall that I served on Mayor Morton's Police and Fire Pension Committee in 2008. Tonight, I am here as a private citizen since our group's work ended in October 2008 after we published our report. My request is that you maintain funding for Evanston's police and fire pension funds at least at last year's level, but under no circumstances would I suggest that you lower funding. The current unfunded liability for the police fund is $86.2 million, or 54%. The fire fund is underfunded by $66.6 million, or 54%. Said another way, the pension debt just for police and fire funds is $152.8 million. Evanston's police and fire pension situation is very precarious, and contributing less money is irresponsible in my opinion. If the unfunded liability was 20% or less and other conditions were improving, I would have a different opinion. To reiterate, the police and fire unfunded liability is about 54%. We're on thin ice. Due to a variety of reasons, we basically put all of our current police and firemen, all their retirees and taxpayers on the ice in Lake Michigan, and it's springtime. This is dangerous. As I learned about pensions in Evanston starting in March of '08 and became aware of the growing problems at Cook County, City of Chicago, and the 5 state pension funds, I have become concerned, angry, disappointed, appalled, disgusted, and depressed. The irresponsible actions taken and the adolescent behavior by our elected officials is a travesty. The only good news is that the public has become aware of the gravity of the situation, and as Daniel Biss has correctly stated, it's a math problem. I give Daniel huge kudos for his maturity, willingness, and ability to forge constructive changes on pension issues in Illinois. Evanston's pension situation will likely get worse in the near future. Why? Demographics are working against the fund. More and more policemen and firemen are going to retire in the next 5 to 10 years. In fact, there are 18 police officers who are currently eligible to retire, and that's today. Another 15 officers in the next 5 years will be able to retire. That's 20% of the active policemen. In 2013, payments for police and fire benefits are estimated at $16.8 million. Funds contributed by active police and firemen, plus the amount recommended by the actuary, are $16.4 million. There's not much room for error. In 10 years, total payments are projected to grow to $21.4 million, up from this year's $16.8. So in 10 years, annual payments are scheduled to increase 27%, and they continue to increase every year for almost another 20 years. Second, the Government Accounting Standards Board, that's GASB, recently passed new guidelines which is going to increase the unfunded liability. That's GASB 67 and 68. You're going to use a lower discount rate because of the large unfunded liability. It's not going to be the 7% that you assumed return. It's based off a double A municipal bond index, but that's going to increase the unfunded liability. Third, both pension funds currently assume a 7% rate of return. This is likely too high by at least 1% and more likely 2%, but it could be even lower. Bill Gross from PIMCO stated in his August commentary that in the future, bonds will return 2% and stocks 4%. So his 3% blended return is a far cry from the 7% currently assumed. Look at the returns these funds earned from 1998 to 2007, barely over 6%. That's in Appendix D from page 22 of the pension report. But since the financial collapse in 2008, the police fund generated a 3.7% annualized return, and the fire fund generated a 3% annualized return. A common mistake people are making is that they're extrapolating historical investment returns from 20 to 30 years ago into the future. But here's the problem. 30 years ago, the 10-year bond peaked at over 15%, and today it's about 1.8%. We have just enjoyed one of the biggest bull markets in bonds in history. Mathematically, these returns can't happen again in the foreseeable future. Also, think about what the chairman of the Fed announced last week. Chairman Bernanke said that short-term rates would be on hold until at least mid-2015, and he announced QE3. These announcements suggest to me and many others that Mr. Bernanke and others are very concerned about our economy. From an investment perspective, this means we'll be earning close to 0% on our cash for the next 3 years, and investment returns across fixed income assets are pulled down due to these policies, while stocks experience a recent gain. Remember that both the police and fire funds have significant investment restrictions, which effectively limits their holdings of stocks, bonds, and cash. All of my comments pertain to the current pension benefits agreed to and the current structure of 630 plus independently managed police and fire funds throughout Illinois. Both issues warrant a separate and thorough consideration to ensure that all police and firemen receive a fair and sustainable pension and taxpayers are treated equitably. This City Council has a moral and ethical responsibility to appropriately fund the police and fire funds. I wish there was also a legal responsibility similar to the IMRF. Think about this. Evanston is considering decreasing funding, and we have a 54% unfunded liability. Cook County is only 43% unfunded, and a report led by Commissioner Bridget Gaynor states that on the current path, this pension plan will be bankrupt by 2038. IMRF is only 20% underfunded, yet they'll likely be raising funding requirements. How can Evanston, which has a larger unfunded liability measured by percent, even consider decreasing its funding? A report released in July 2012 by the American Academy of Actuaries states that pension plans should have a strategy in place to attain or maintain a funded status of 100% or greater over a reasonable period of time. I don't understand Evanston's strategy. Decreasing funding will increase the unfunded liability and further jeopardize pensions for all current police and firemen and retirees. These pension bills don't go away. The pension debt just grows because compounding never sleeps. Compounding works 24/7, and every day you try and ignore the issue, it gets worse. When the 2008 Pension Committee published the report, unfunded pensions were $146 million. Today, it's almost $153 million and likely to grow. And guess who will ultimately pay the bill? Your children and grandchildren. So instead of leaving them with some nickels and dimes in their piggy bank, you're going to leave them with a big IOU. Is that what you want to do for your children and grandchildren? Is that your legacy? Our country has given each generation a better opportunity, and I hope that you will continue this American tradition. In summary, both police and fire pension funds are poorly funded today with a 54% unfunded liability. Demographics are a headwind, as reflected by the growing pension payments projected over the next 30 years. Recent accounting changes announced by GASB will further increase the unfunded liability, and future returns on assets will likely be lower than projected. Please make the right decision and fund the pension at last year's level and make a commitment to pay down this onerous pension debt. Your children and grandchildren will thank you. I appreciate your time and attention. I'm happy to take questions, and if I don't have the data, I'm more than happy to follow up with you so that we can have accurate and complete information. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Bressler is next.
Good evening. My name is Jason Bressler. I am the owner of Revolution Spin Studio on 904 Sherman Avenue. I just wanted to speak to the council to address last week's remarks and concerns from both Martha Mosier and of 906 Sherman Avenue and of Margaret Peggy Tarr of 907 Sherman Avenue. Like Martha, I'm a longtime resident of Evanston. I opened Revolution Spin specifically in Evanston because of its support of local small businesses. In a few weeks, on October 1st, we will be at Revolution Spin's one-year anniversary of business. Like Martha, I had a dream of opening my own business and thriving in that business. To date, Revolution Spin has over 2,000 clients, over 1,100 of which are residents of Evanston, with clients as far north and west as Rolling Meadows and Palatine, and as far south as Hyde Park in Chicago. Of those clients, most regularly visit the Main Street Shopping District, an area they otherwise may not and probably did not know about. My clients regularly shop at other local businesses in the area, and as a matter of fact, Mosier Sewing Studio has benefited from this, as several clients have gone to her sewing studio. Until very recently, I always encouraged my clients to do the same. I've worked incredibly hard to build a successful business and stay in my location, while promoting a healthy lifestyle and contributing to Evanston's local economy. While I have never before felt the need to disparage anyone and instead focus only on the positives of what Revolution Spin brings to the community, I honestly feel in this case the need to defend myself. The on-the-record comments of both Ms. Mosier and Ms. Tarr are at best only 10% truths, the rest filled with conjecture. When Revolution Spin opened for business, I immediately went into Mosier Sewing Studio and spoke with Martha directly. I told her that I was completely sympathetic to the fact that I didn't know how much absorption the walls between our businesses would take, and that if the music was ever too loud, to please call my personal cell phone, which I provided. As we approach our one-year anniversary, Ms. Mosier has called exactly one time to ask me to turn down the music, and that was 11 months ago. I immediately had my instructor comply. Martha then started calling the building management company, Cass Management, to file any complaints. Cass Management representative Matthew Yellen called me directly and personally asked me on behalf of Cass Management to not confront Martha Mosier in any capacity, and instead to let this dispute be handled by the management company. Almost a year into business, I have always complied with that request. In the 11 months since Martha Mosier called me to have my instructor turn down the music, I've had to install video surveillance equipment in my studio to point both into my shop as well as the sidewalk in front of it, as Ms. Mosier began about 6 months ago destroying any property I had on the sidewalk, namely a small sandwich board sign. In full view of a full class, Ms. Mosier would violently swing her purse into and eventually broke my sandwich board. Additionally, Ms. Mosier barged into an ongoing class and again, in full view of a full class of clients, physically threatened the instructor. All clients have been asked and are willing to testify to this if necessary. I had to talk the instructor out of filing harassment charges against Ms. Mosier, and I emailed both Martha and Cass Management and told her I would press charges against her if she were to either threaten my employees or to destroy my property again, and also to let her know about the video surveillance. At this point in time, Mosier Sewing Studio, which is located directly next to me, has become an anti-Revolution Spin store. I'm not sure if she even does business outside of this at this point. She's plastered advertisements of other gyms and spin studios in the area on her windows, and since last week's meeting here, has put up signs on every storefront window she has, asking people to come in and sign her petition to rid the neighborhood of Revolution Spin. At this morning's Main Street Association meeting, several business members told us that they were approached by her but refused to sign the petition. As for Ms. Tarr's comments, while I understand her complaints, they are completely unfounded and untrue, at least for the last 11 months. The first several weeks Revolution Spin was open for business, I admit that I did leave our front door open. I personally did not realize how the sound from the speakers carried out into the streets. Roughly 4 weeks after I opened, I received an anonymous letter from the Sherman Street neighbors asking me to please keep the front door closed at all times to alleviate any unnecessary noise. Since that day 11 months ago, our front door has never been open while playing loud music. Both Ms. Mosier and Ms. Tarr routinely call on the Evanston Police Department to file complaints against Revolution Spin for loud noise. Not once at any point has Revolution Spin been cited for loud music. Additionally, only a handful of times have we ever been told to turn down our music. Any officer I've spoke with routinely apologizes for having to come out yet again to disturb class. In fact, last weekend, the officer who responded surmised with me that Ms. Tarr looks at Revolution Spin's schedule, sees when the class is, and then just calls to have the police show up for the sole purpose of disrupting my business. The officer sat outside of Revolution Spin for over 5 minutes, and when I walked outside to speak with him, he was visibly annoyed and told me that he literally could not hear a thing. He also told me the complaint came from across the street, clearly Ms. Tarr. As a matter of fact, last night at approximately 7:45 p.m., Ms. Mosier again called the EPD to come to Revolution Spin. My general manager, who spoke here last week on my behalf, asked Ms. Mosier, who was standing outside, to please just stop calling. The back and forth with her was getting out of control. Her words to my general manager, the full class of clients, and the police officer were, "No, I am going to ruin your business." As a business owner, I'm consistently told I'm the most patient man in the world. I've basically sat idly by while two individuals conduct a witch hunt against me and my business in the most childish and vindictive ways possible. Both Ms. Mosier and Ms. Tarr, as well as the city of Evanston, should be appalled at the waste of city resources on the daily visits to Revolution Spin, which are done solely out of the spite of two people and not for any other issue. Yes, Revolution Spin will be taking over the space at 906 Sherman Avenue, currently occupied by Mosier Sewing Studio. This was not done in cahoots with the management company, as Ms. Mosier alleges, but because Revolution Spin has become a thriving Evanston business with over 2,000 clients, visited daily by at least 50 to 75 unique visitors, employing 12 people, and we have the need to expand and, quite frankly, the desire to stay where we are. Revolution Spin brings business to the surrounding businesses in the district, and in my opinion, is a shining example of how Evanstonians help support a good local business and help it grow and thrive. For my part, I have negotiated with CAS Management installing soundproofing at Revolution Spin after the expansion on the ceilings and adjoining wall to Jeff Martin Photography Studio. Mr. Martin is in full support of Revolution Spin moving next to his studio. All of my instructors know not to play loud music or yell loudly on the microphone, and we do not conduct classes during Evanston's noise ordinance periods. Lastly, as a business owner, I ask you to please let me conduct my business in the safe and respectful manner that I always have been. Please help my clients be protected from the bullying and harassment of Ms. Mosier and Ms. Tarr. Please stop allowing the city's resources to be wasted on baseless noise complaints originated solely from the same two people over and over and over again. Please allow me to continue to thrive and grow and bring even more business to the Main Street Shopping District and continue to be a shining example of small business in Evanston. Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes public comments. City Manager, we have special orders of business, the Summer Youth Program.
Yes, ma'am, Mayor, members of the council, we've had a very successful summer, engaging many youth in many different kinds of activities around Evanston. We want to take a little time this evening to tout our successes, and we've asked Doug Gaynor and members of the staff from Parks, Recreation, Community Services, as well as Karen Lyons and members of the staff of the Evanston Public Library to come this evening and make a presentation. Mr. Gaynor, good evening.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council, City Manager Bobkowitz, and Deputy City Clerk Otwell. I'm Doug Gaynor, Director of Parks, Recreation, Community Service. This evening, staff of the Recreation Division, the Youth and Young Adult section, and the library will present information on the summer programs that were conducted all over the city this summer. This summer's Recreation Division presentation focuses on the age group of 5 to 26. Our efforts were to provide positive opportunities for youth in order for them to begin to appreciate and engage in positive behavior, and as the ages increase, hopefully with these programs modify some unacceptable behaviors. The first slide that we're going to show are a number of the partnerships that we have created over the years, and you can see this is just really a small number. The last line, which indicates affiliated organizations, represents approximately 19, and we could have put a couple of pages or a couple of slides up here. We thought it was just easier to show this one slide, but that's the Little League Baseball, basketball, football, the Tennis Association, all the organizations that provide outstanding opportunities in a cooperative effort with our department. In many cases, if they are team turf-type sports, we provide the turf, and these organizations provide all the coaching and administrative responsibilities. It's a great partnership, and it saves the city a considerable amount of money. The first program that we're going to talk about is our lakefront. And of course, this year, it was probably one of the hottest summers that we've experienced in many years. Beach attendance was outstanding. Our tokens that we sold, we actually ran out of before the season began. As you can see, 21,800 tokens were sold. 29,000 daily tickets were sold. So yes, at some point when we get into budget, you'll see a significant increase in our over the projected revenue that we had. And of course, that's not something we necessarily control. We had great summer weather. The free tokens that were given away, 450, and this is a combination of a program the Parks and Recreation Board created where when someone purchases a token, they're asked if they'd like to make a donation towards funding an additional token for someone who can't afford it. So there were approximately 200 of those that we were able to give away as free tokens based on that donation program. And the other 250 were actually tokens that the City Council gave us an additional amount of tokens to give away. The 10-visit Teen Punch Card Program. This was the mayor's idea a couple of years ago. They were distributed at the library and at rec centers, and you can see there were 300 of those that were given out over the summer. In addition, there were 900 free beach tokens distributed to the following agencies, and this program is specifically geared towards providing each of these agencies a number of tokens to provide to the families who they actually are their clients and are given those tokens in order for them to use the lakefront. Finally, the free beach passes for weekly group outings. There will be a number of agencies in town that will say they would like to go out to the beach on a Thursday with their group. If it's a not-for-profit, it's been the practice of the department since I've been here to provide them that opportunity. And instead of giving tokens, what we do is give them a letter that says, please admit. It's shown to our folks at each beach or whatever beach they attend, and then they're given the opportunity to attend. The lakefront programs are probably, without a question, the most popular programs that we have during the summer. Although our staff is going to be presenting all of the programs, an overview, the most probably important number on the left-hand side, the last line, is there was a waiting list of over 250 individuals in our aquatics camp program. We just were not able to accommodate them based on the facilities we have and the equipment we have. And that's really, we've talked with the city manager about that, and he's given us some ideas of how we might be able to increase that, and we'll be working on that over the next several months. The youth and family programs, the first three items there were part of the Super Summer program that we have had. These are opportunities for young folks to come in. We had a sandcastle contest. We have open fishing and open tubing for these folks. It's not a registration program. It's show up, and we'll try to provide those kinds of activities. The Dempster Street Beach was also very popular. Lessons are incredibly popular. We have sailing, kayaking, this new paddle boarding that's going on. It's incredible. We can't keep the equipment that we have on the beach. It's constantly being rented out, which shows the popularity of what's happening. It's really phenomenal, and of course, again, we had some great weather. And you can see that the Dog Beach continues to be an extremely popular venue. The other lakefront statistics, which I thought were very important, we sort of sifted through the first four items that you see there and only gave you numbers of the most serious. So as an example, when we are advised that there's a missing child, there's a specific procedure that we follow immediately. One of them is calling the police department. The other is fanning out folks to try to find where this missing child is. And surprisingly, or maybe not surprisingly, in most cases we find them either at a concession stand, the restroom, or actually in their parents' car, if the parents have driven, taking a nap. But it's something that we thought it was important to show the water rescues. These were not just picking a child up who may have fallen in shallow water. These are when our lifeguard staff has actually had to go into the water to pull out someone who's distressed. And you can see this 27. It's a unfortunate number, but being a little bit superstitious, I don't usually talk about this often, but we've been very fortunate, on knock wood, I guess, the fact that we had another great summer. Our staff did an outstanding job of keeping our folks safe. The lakefront picnic permits, lagoon shelter rentals, and the lighthouse shelter rentals are pretty much self-explanatory. So with that, this evening, I've asked each of our managers who have responsibilities for recreation programming to give you a quick overview of their programs and some of the attendance and statistics. So I'm going to introduce Jim Farrar, who's our recreation supervisor and is responsible for a number of our programs.
First slide I'm going to talk about is a little bit about park and picnic permits. A picnic permit is basically a permit we issue to a specific park with a specific picnic site, like the shelter of Lovelace or the picnic areas at the lakefront. Usually these are small family or medium family picnics groups that meet there. Park permit might be a bigger event like a James Park. We have a lot of events out there. The picnic you see on the picture right here is the Rotary Club annual picnic, which takes over pretty much all Centennial Park, and they've been coming for a long time, as long as I've been here. We also issue permits out to the tennis courts and to the fire circle, which is very, very popular. We also work with 5 of the local sports associations, the Evanston AWSO Soccer, Team Evanston Soccer, Evanston Baseball Softball Association, the Junior Wildcat Football, and the Evanston Lacrosse programs. There are 4,500 Evanston youth that participate in these programs, and they're organized by the volunteer groups. They play on 52 athletic fields that we maintain and that we schedule through our permit process. So it's a fairly large program that the people here, volunteers, run in town. Okay. Special Rec this summer had 3 camps. We had 71 campers at our 3 camps. The Park Camp, which is located at Park School, Camp Real, which is at Lovelace Park, and the Aquatic Adventure Camp, which is at Dempster Beach. In addition to these camps, we have a very comprehensive Special Olympic program. This summer, we had 17 athletes travel to the state games in June in Illinois State University. We had 11 compete in the bowling meet, which was at Elk Grove, and 9 in the district bocce tournament, which is at North Lake. We have 125 families that participate in our Special Rec programs. Okay. The department also closely works with special need participants and families that want to integrate into our non-special rec programs. Our inclusion specialists will meet with these parents and the participants and determine which program that was best for them. She'll provide training for the staff, and if needed, provide a one-on-one aid for the participant. As always, she'll go back and check it with everybody to make sure everybody's having a great time. We have 180 children and young adults that took advantage of the service, and that represents about 140 Evanston families. Next, I would like to introduce Kevin Wallen, manager of Chandler Neuberger Center, who will present the next couple slides. Thank you.
Good evening. Chandler Neuberger had another outstanding summer. We offered 16 different types of camps, including our mothership, the sports camp. We had over 1,000 participants, as you can see. Great America is a field trip that we offer through the sports camps, and we had about 150 youth participate in that program. Altogether, over the course of the summer, we put a little slide in there about the kids getting on the bus. In our area, we offered 86 different field trips, so we do use the buses quite a bit to go to special places like Legoland, we'll get back to that later, mini golf, bowling, and other areas of interest for the children. I'd like to highlight the LIT for Teens. That's a program that we started about 8 years ago, and it's actually called Leader in Training. And what we're trying to do is help the teens get a feel of what it would be like to be a camp counselor. And it's been a great system for us, a farm system, if you will, because we usually end up hiring at least 50% of the students that go through the program.
and they learn everything from the safety sides of things to just good organization and how to lead games and activities. The final one there, Teen Aqua Adventure, is a new program we offered this year, and it was a camp where the kids went to mini golf courses and pools with water slides for a whole week, and they loved it. So we got good reviews on it, and plan to offer it again next year. We also offer some camp programs in other sites. Tennis, as you can see, we had 350 registrations, and that doesn't include the community program. Youth golf, we offer right next to the Chandler Newberger Center at the community golf course. I'd like to highlight the Lego camp at Ackerman Park. That started about 4 or 5 years ago, and at that time we had to open up many more sections because we had so many kids that wanted to get into this program, and we accommodated them by opening afternoon sessions and so on. But nonetheless, we couldn't accommodate everyone, but we always try to. This year we had 117 kids overall in all our programs, not just Lego camps, that were on the wait list and we just couldn't get into the program. The bottom two programs there, Pee Wee Sports Camp and Camp Kaleidoscope, are preschool camps, and we had excellent and full attendance in those programs as well. Some programs that we offered at the center itself include the Red Cross safety classes and teen babysitters training. Teen babysitters training we started in the year 2000, and again, that's the type of program where the kids get training in how to take care of children properly and what safety issues, knowing the phone numbers, what are the rules of the house, etc. And they actually get a certificate from the Red Cross. It's a certified program where they cover all the ins and outs of being a babysitter, and it's kind of promoting a little free enterprise here. The Chandler Newberger Center staff organized the 4th of July parade for the department, and we offer, as you can see, the open gyms and roller skating, birthday party rentals. They're not real strong in the summer, but overall in the course of a year we'll get about 35 or 40. Tennis, the community tennis program had another strong year. We had 5 nights this year of Friday free tennis at James Park, and good solid attendance of 224 participants. We had 483 receive free tennis lessons at Foster Park. And on the bottom there, you probably recognize Don Walton. He's been with us. He's done quite a number of things in town here, from being the truant officer and a police officer, and he's helped part-time teach tennis for 30 years and has done a fabulous job in that role. And you also may recall that years ago, there was some dispute over whether or not to put tennis courts at Foster Park, and they are being well used, and it's going strong. Lastly, I'd just like to mention the Evanston Communities Tennis Association booked 700 tennis courts from us this year, and they use those to play in leagues against other communities. Now I'd like to introduce Bob Dornicker, the Assistant Director of Parks, Recreation, and Community Services.
Thank you and good evening. As part of the Mayor's Super Summer program, our department staff also coordinated some special programs this summer. We had open volleyball at Clark Street Beach. We had a beach party at Clark Street Beach with food, music, volleyball, a DJ, and swimming. At Cluster Fair this year, special thanks to John Sosek, we actually moved he allowed us to go back to the main stage. We were at our first year last year, we were down at the end of Chicago Avenue. He gave us space for our Evanston youth talent. We actually had 2 groups perform at the Custer Fair this year on Sunday afternoon. We partnered with the Ridgeville Park District for a scavenger hunt down at one of the Ridgeville Park sites. We had a talent show at Twiggs Park at the end of the summer. We had a dodgeball tournament for youth over at the Chandler Newberger Center. You will continue to hear about more of the activities that we had at some of the rec centers, such as open gym, as Kevin Wallen just mentioned, and volleyball and roller skating from some of the other recreation managers. I would also like to point out this year that special thanks to our engagement division here at the city. They were helpful and able to create the social media outlets that we needed to really to try to reach the kids, the youth and young adults in a better format. We were able to create a youth and young adult web page, a new Facebook page. We actually tweeted out information to all of the individuals who had signed up for our tweeting calendar or tweeting. We also created a Google Calendar, so you're able to find this stuff online. As we get into the fall, you'll start to see more programs from our department, and one of the ones is flag football. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Rob Lloyd, the manager of the Robert Crown Center.
Good evening. We here at Robert Crown have the luxury of staying open. Ice rink stays open all summer. Most of the local rinks usually close during the summer, but we stay open all year round. So, in essence, we get to have our ice programs all year. The top line for the 87, we passed out 87 skating passes. That was part of the mayor's summer youth program. 773 public skating participants. That's summer only. 256 hockey camp participants, which is a really good number for us. 86 figure skating campers, 71 freestyle skating campers, which is a higher level skating participants. 115 skaters registered for practice ice packages, and that's pre-registration for fall skating. 660 drop-in participants for practice ice, which is a really good number. 264 youth and adults registered for ice skating and lessons and clinics, which is also another pre-registration for fall, just by coming in the center to skate. We had 81 drop-in skaters for speed skating practice, which is, speed skating slows down a little bit, but that's a good number for speed skating because, as you know, our Olympic year is coming up, so it'll give us a big jump for next year. Summer camps. We had a really good camp this year. As you can see, we had 507 participants. That number probably could have been a little bit larger, but because of the capacity of Robert Crown, we had to start a waiting list. Our waiting list probably was, I would say, somewhere near around 50 kids that we couldn't accommodate. But we had 342 elementary and middle school kids, 165 preschool campers. And over to the left, you can see the breakdown of the 5 different camps that we had. These are some of the other programs that we had at Crown. We had about 3 open houses this summer, art instruction, and those pictures are a little example of some of the art instruction that we had. Youth dance classes that we kind of incorporated into our camps. Ceramics, which go all year round. Martial arts, which go all year round. Lacrosse camp, youth sports instruction, and we really had a big surge in drop-in gym because of the mayor's programs again. 347 participants, and that was in 8 weekends. And we normally didn't have that many for open gym because of other outside activities. Now I'd like to introduce Bessie Jenkins, manager of the Fleetwood Journey Community Center and Theater and Ecology Center.
Good evening. This year, the Fleetwood Jourdain Theater had 3 fully produced plays, Heat, Home, and The Truth Be Told. When it came to Heat, all of the actresses in Heat were Evanston residents, which made the production very popular. Home was also very popular, but also with Truth Be Told, the writer and the actress in that was an Evanston resident. Our theater manager, Mr. Tim Rose, had a stellar summer when it came to the other productions that he put on. Besides the dramatic readings, he also had 2 concerts. The gospel music concert, which also, we have to be proud, we had about 3 City of Evanston employees. The Blues Festival, which was David Chainsaw DuPont, is also an Evanston resident. The spoken word, and the mayor's children's play, a play for very young audiences over at the Ecology Center, was also popular with a lot of our younger parents. Tim went on to continue his outreach to the community but with our Primetime Players Senior Citizens Drama Club. He also has a Fleetwood Jourdain Teen Club and a Y-Step project, which is an intergenerational project between Evanston youth and senior citizens. Tim has made our theater very diverse. He's also doing a lot of outreach to make sure that he reaches the entire community. Many of our theater participants also take some of his classes, and he's averaging over 70 ticket holders per show. More than 25 residents performed or worked in professional production. When it comes to the Fleetwood Jourdain Center, because of space, we had 125 campers this year. Also this year, we started a kindergarten camp, and with some support of the Evanston Public Library and the Youth Job Center, we were able to bring a program called the ABC Booster Program, which continued or enforced some of the things that the children, especially the 4.5-year-olds, had learned during the year. We also had a program called Digitales, which was brought to us last year by the teachers in School District 65. And you can see some of the children working on it in the bottom, where at the end of the summer everybody put on a garage band performance, a CD. They took some old fairy tales and changed them around quite a bit. We also found that our young men ages 8 to 12 kind of like to fiddle with things. So we gave them an opportunity to put Mythbusters in the class to see which is really true and which isn't. And they also visited the Museum of Science and Industry. We have a lot of budding cooks, so we also introduced the kids to a lot of culinary arts. They also had an opportunity to learn while doing this. Some of them don't think that they're learning when they're cooking, but still we're reinforcing some math and some other skills throughout the summer. This summer, Nielsen, Northwestern University Health and Nutrition Day was held at Fleetwood Jourdain, where the cooks from Northwestern Kitchens came over and went through an afternoon or a morning of cooking with the kids, teaching them healthy eating habits, what can come in from, you'll see a slide in a minute, our garden to the kitchen and how it's best for them. They also provided us with 250 sandwiches and healthy snacks for 10 weeks. Our camp program, has a very strong emphasis on physical fitness. That's why this year we were glad to have nutrition come in and help the kids realize, beside physical fitness, why they have to have such a healthy body. Other programs that we have at Fleetwood Jourdain, you can see we have an intergenerational neighborhood garden. One of the neighbors helped the kids really put this together, and a couple of seniors supervised. So that gave them an opportunity to really see firsthand, start to finish, just what homegrown vegetables look like. We had open gym from 896 participants, and midget and pint-sized basketball with 325. Our late-night young adults were the average of 25 a week, were the ones that were aged 18 to 25, and they played on 2 nights a week. Roller skating, which still is very popular, we skate at Fleetwood Jourdain from Friday night through Sunday. We take a break on Saturday because of basketball, but everybody still seems to enjoy it. The open rec for middle school kids was 675. In the evenings, we found that was a time a lot of kids really get up and get active, especially after 3 o'clock. So we'd open up the building. We'd have a lot of young kids come in and participate. We PlayStation or whatever else they wanted to do. We also found that they really like to play ping pong, too. Our junior referee program helped us with our midget and pint-sized basketball, because these youth were taught how to officiate games. And because the younger kids were, they were just a little younger than them, we felt it was very beneficial. We also have a karate program, and in the summer, our middle school council still meets, but it's not as big as it is during the school year. Our other outreach programs, we have a summer food program at 4 different sites. This is the second year for James Park, and this year we average anywhere from 90 to 125 meals per day. We served 32,000 meals this summer, and the program is 95% funded by the Illinois State Board of Education. Over at our Mason Park Center, there's drop-in activities for young middle school students and youth high school students. We also find there's a lot of kids that have to bring their siblings with them, so they're also welcome. We had a drumming program, video game tournaments, and also the skills and drills. We have 2 pool tables over at Mason Park, and we find that that's a new sport that the young men really enjoy. Some of them aren't great at it, but still they're having a great time with it. We also had table games, arts and crafts, and this was also one of our ABC booster sites for the summer reading, along with James Park. Now, okay, at the Evans, unfortunately, Claire couldn't be here tonight, but at the Evanston Ecology Center, we had over 1,200 individuals that visited the Evanston Ecology Center. Some of these same individuals are on their volunteer roster where they come and help take care of the animals, which is a very huge job. There's over 700 volunteer hours with Northwestern, ETHS, and other organizations and residents. Right now, I think Claire is also working on a partnership with Northeastern Illinois University to have a couple of classes held at the center. There were 820 campers that attended seven summer camps at 4 different campsites. So it was a pretty big camp this year. 500 campers participated in canoe trips, and there were also canoe trips for other camps like Fleetwood Jourdain, Camp Real, and Robert Crown. Some of the students from the youth job program, summer youth program, also went on the canoe trips. 272 garden plots were rented to residents in 4 locations: Lighthouse, James Park, Twiggs, and McCormick Gardens. There were a free access to fishing program at Lovelace Pond, and they had over 75 participants each Saturday and over 150 participants on a fishing frenzy day. Now I will introduce to you Christina Ferrero, manager at the Levy Senior Center.
Good evening. As you know, the Levy Senior Center is a place for people who are 55 years and older, but in the evenings and weekends, we open up to the entire community. So the Levy Center has roller skating on Friday evenings, and open gym on Sundays and Taekwondo on Monday and Wednesday evenings. This summer, we also offered several teen trips, and we continue to work with students from the high school and park school. These are the children that assist us with office and custodial duties. And this year, 2 high school students assisted with the Evanston Children's Theater program as well. Younger people continue to take fitness classes at Levy. They use the fitness room and the computer lab, and several younger people are still using the computer lab on a regular basis to research job opportunities and work on their resumes. We also have a high school student who volunteers a few hours a week to help seniors learning computers, and they get stuck, and he's there to help. And now I'd like to introduce Jane Boyda from the Evanston Public Library.
Hi, thank you all for your time today. I'm happy to talk to you about our Evanston Public Library summer reading program. We've been running a summer reading program to encourage all the children and teens in Evanston to keep reading over the summer. We've been running it probably since I was a kid at the Evanston Library, before my time as the supervisor. This particular picture on the slide today is from the ABC Boosters, our partnership with Fleetwood and also with District 65. Rick Kinnebrew, who is our outreach librarian, I believe a number of you know Mr. Rick from around town. Actually, his participation was in helping to train the young people who were working with the younger children in order to give them some extra literacy skills. This particular slide is showing the growth in our numbers in our participation of our summer reading program and the finalists that have participated. I just picked a year at random, 2005, to show you. In 2005, we were participating at the library's 3 locations only. In probably about 2010, we began to outreach into other areas. We now, both 2011 and 2012, with our huge years, have also partnered. We have a presence at both Robert Crown, the Levy Center, and we also have been operating a summer reading stop at the Dempster Dodge Plaza for the past few summers. Those outreach efforts have really helped us to increase our numbers, as well as the fact that we think we're being rewarded by a poor economy, as probably the Park District is too. When people can't afford to go away, all the opportunities that we have for activities for youth in the summer here in Evanston become that much more critical for people to keep them occupied. So that's showing the readers. This is a slide of another partnership program we have with Northwestern University. This is a program called the Book Buddies. There's an organization called Jumpstart that is actually nationwide, and Evanston Northwestern campus has a chapter. So this is one of the a couple of the Evanston Northwestern students who meet with us every Friday, a drop-in program where they read one-on-one or in small groups with children throughout the library. I'm going to introduce you to Renee Newmeyer. Now, Renee is our new young adult librarian. She hasn't even been here quite a year, and this is actually one of her staff on the middle right row, Jarrett Dapier, who has run a teen drama club. The next slides are all about the teen programs.
Oh, okay. So this year, our teen theater troupe, which is run by Jarrett Dapier, like she said, put on a presentation of The Giver, and they found like an adaptive version of the book. It's a very popular book, like The Hunger Games. It's a dystopian book. And the whole production was done by teens. They did the tech on it. They presented 3 performances that were all full at the library. They had about 40 to 50 people each. It was a very awesome performance. We got a lot of positive feedback about it. This is another program we offered from a local Evanston resident, Molly Monahan. She did a Pitch Perfect college essay writing project for 9th through 12th graders, and it was all different tips to get teens ready to write their college essay, because she really found from her past experience teaching that teens had no idea what to put in their essays, and lots of schools have different types of essays. So it's all different things to kind of get them started on their way, and we offer 2 sessions of that, and we actually had to move it to a bigger room because it was so popular and had so many participants, so that was a huge success as well. And this is one of programs we've been doing for the past 3 years. It's called Project Excite. It's a partnership we have with Northwestern, which they run Project Excite, and it's targeting minorities in the Evanston area who struggle in math and science, and it helps them. They start in 3rd grade and it goes all the way up to 8th grade in hopes that in high school they'll take more honor level math and science courses. And so they come to the library for 6 weeks in the summer to help them build a relationship with the library, know that they can come to the loft to check out books, and then we also incorporate bike maintenance into it. And so we've gotten a grant for the past few years from the Evanston Bike Club to get bikes from Working Bike Co-op in the city. And then we teach, Dan Telfesky, who's on the left there, teaches them how to repair flats, how to fix the brakes, different things like that. So we tie that all into the math and science part. Then we also do a read aloud. We do different writing prompts for 2 hours every Thursday for 6 weeks. And at the end, the 6th graders who participate in it present to their parents everything. So they write poetry, they write short stories, all different things. It's a lot of fun. And then the bikes that they work on, they actually get to take home at the end. And they also get a helmet and a bike lock that's provided by Working Bikes Co-op. So it's been a huge success and a partnership that will be continuing next summer as well.
And I get the good fortune to introduce my colleague Jeff Corey from the Cultural Arts.
Good evening. Well, I'm happy to report that we have wrapped up a very fun-filled and exciting year in the cultural arts. I'll touch upon each of the programs that we presented briefly, and then also try to accentuate the specific efforts that we made to incorporate and reach out to youth and involve them in our programs. Our most high-profile event each year is the Evanston Ethnic Arts Festival. This year was no different. We're actually very proud this year to, for the first time, have our headline performer for the Ethnic Arts Festival, Sidi Touri, a guitarist from Mali, was featured on the cover of the Chicago Reader. And in terms of trying to involve youth in the program, we had a performance by a group called Young Chicago Authors. They are a poetry slam, breakdancing, hip-hop kind of troupe, and so we involved teens from ETHS. A poetry slam team from ETHS participated in that presentation as well. The Evanston Lakeshore Arts Festival took place the first weekend in August, and the youth element there was we had a ETHS band called Handsome Salamander, performed on site, and there's also a children's craft tent. The Ethnic Festival and the Lakeshore Arts Festival both have family crafts areas where kids and families can come and make arts projects, as well as entertainment throughout the weekend, visual art, and we also have a silent auction as part of the Lakeshore Festival. The Starlight Concert Series presents 16 performances in 6 different park locations throughout Evanston. That's a slide of Question Mark and the Mysterians and a rather enthusiastic crowd greeting him. For that show, we actually had one woman flew in from North Carolina to attend the show, and another one drove up from Kentucky just to see Question Mark and the Mysterians. So we're doing our part to try to spur cultural tourism in Evanston. Last year, somebody actually flew in from Mexico to see Melanie Safka. So we're trying to attract people to our lovely community. And we also incorporated a number of youth performers in the Starlight Series this year. We wanted to reach out and try to encourage more students to come to our shows, and so we talked to some teens and said, you know, what do teens want to hear? Well, I mean, what kind of bands do we book? Should we book hip-hop or electronic music, or, you know, what should we do? And the response basically was that kids want to see kids bands. So we incorporated some kids bands into our programming. That's a hip-hop duo, recent ETHS graduates called The Loneliest Funk. They opened for a band called the Oh My's, which is kind of an up-and-coming Chicago band at Twigs Park. And as you can see, a lot of their friends came and really enjoyed the show. Another number of other young performance ensembles, including the Paul Green School of Rock, Going Backwards, which is an ETHS band, Expressions of MJ, T-Dot, and others. We presented our 2nd annual Starlight Movie Series, and I'm happy to report that attendance was dramatically up from last year, and actually each movie that we had was better attended than the previous one. In this case, we actually sent department staff to ETHS, and they surveyed more than 100 high school students and asked the students, what movies do you want to see? And so we gave them a list of 20 or 25 suggestions and also opened it up and told them to, you know, give us your ideas. And the 2 overwhelming favorites from the kids were Iron Man and Ferris Bueller's Day Off, so we put both of those on the schedule. Remember, I got out to Dawes Park for Ferris Bueller and remember thinking, okay, where's the kids? Where's, you know, here's your movie. And 5 minutes before it started, about 20 teens all rolled in, and they sat down in the front row and they laughed and really seemed to enjoy the heck out of it. So we were very happy to be able to reach out to the young people with our movie series as well. Cultural arts summer arts camps are very much targeted towards the youth. We served more than 500 young people with our arts camps this year at the Noyes Cultural Arts Center as well as at school locations. We did have some people on waiting lists for our camps. And this was the 30th year of Evanston Arts Camps, founded by Marilyn Price, so there was a special recognition of the anniversary of Arts Camps. And there are 17 different camp programs. The next slide details the list of the camps that were presented. The historical immersion camps are very, very popular. Our program coordinator, Angela Allen, does a marvelous job of putting these camps together. So you're not just learning about the arts, but you're also learning about history. In a lot of these camps, there's pirate camp and princess camp and Victorian camp and just a wide range of camps, something really for everyone. We also collaborated with the library on some of our camps this year, and we're very excited to add that to our camp lineup this year as well. And finally, the public art program had a busy summer in the mural program. We had 3 murals approved for the summer. 2 of them have been installed. Sorry about the shadows, kind of hard to take pictures of murals in the late afternoon. But the mural on the left was installed by YOU Camp, and that's on Central Street, the Metra Viaduct. It actually says the word Evanston in different colored letters. And then there's kind of an image of train windows that bisects the word Evanston with silhouettes of passengers in the windows. The lower right is a mural that was created by a YMCA camp, Camp Wannago, that's on Greenwood Street. And the Justin Wynn Fund had a mural that was approved. It was originally intended to be installed in August. They had a bit of a delay, so now they're looking at an October installation of that one on Church Street. And next, I would like to introduce Kevin Brown, who is the program manager in our Young Adult and Youth Division, and also Kimberly R. Jenkins, the assistant program manager.
Good evening. Thank you. We wanted to provide you with some context for the Youth and Young Adult Division. which you well know the signature program is the Mayor's Summer Youth Employment Program. But this division and its mission is an outgrowth of the city's youth engagement initiative. And so we are attempting to facilitate an effective public and private collaborative partnerships that would ensure particularly 4 areas: recruitment and training and retention of Evanston youth, for the adult workforce, academic, vocational, certificate in entrepreneurial internships, externships, and apprenticeship programming opportunities, coordination of the City of Evanston programs and projects that impact youth and young adults, and development and promotion of civic responsibility and engagement. So we are actually focusing on 4 areas. It's easy to remember if you think about education, employment, effective recreation, and then civic engagement. It is a best practice model that the city has adopted. It will focus on the mental health of our youth and young adults, their physical health, their intellectual health, their employability, as well as their civic engagement and responsibility. We initiated a number of outreach procedures to ensure that we would reach as many youth and young adults as possible, but we had a particular focus to try to reach those young people that are disengaged or not engaged in processes and structures that many kids that are developing and successful are engaged in. And so we reached out to our partner organizations in the community, such as the Youth Job Center, Family Focus, YOU, and McGraw YMCA. We held employment outreach sessions at the library, at all of the community centers, and we conducted outreach sessions at every middle school in Evanston, all of the at our one high school, as well as visiting 2 area alternative high schools. Now I'm going to allow Kim to finish the presentation. Thank you.
Good evening. Just to go over some numbers that we had for the MSYEP this summer, we have had 543 students whom applied for positions. It's pretty close in regards to females and males that applied, with 169 students actually being placed with jobs, and we actually had more males than females. And on the right hand of the screen, you see the demographics by ward in regards to applicants, where most of the applicants came from the 2nd ward. On this slide, you show our partnering employers, which we had the benefit of working with a lot of great organizations. We had our 50-50 partners, which were our employers who actually employed students through the MSYEP. They paid the students the entire summer, and at the end of the summer, the City of Evanston reimbursed them 50% of the wages. We also had 100% partners who were very generous in that they paid the entire wages for the entire summer for all the students with no reimbursement. We also had other employer partners who worked through the City of Evanston to employ many summer youth employees as well. And as you see on the right hand of the screen, you also see many departments within the City of Evanston who had the benefit of working with many employees who did an excellent job this summer. A lot of times, due to the weather in the summer, we had some days where it was too hot or it was raining, so oftentimes we'd have certain workshops. So the one you see at the top left-hand corner is a Chase Banking workshop, where we had a representative from Chase Bank come and speak to the students about opening checking and savings accounts and just being fiscally responsible. Some of our students also had the opportunity to work with Cook County Commissioner Larry Suffredin on an intergenerational project of working at gardens at 2300 Noyes Court. And also, too, we had one of our community services team primarily do painting around the City of Evanston. And you see them on a tour of some of the sites that they were working on. And if you go along Chicago Avenue, you see a lot of the work that they did complete, and they did an excellent job. So this summer, we were just not making sure that students had jobs, but they were actually learning some type of civic responsibility as well. One of our biggest parts of our program is our outreach, and that's huge for us, especially as we move into the fall. So we had a number of events, and 2 of the most important ones were the open mic contest, where we held them at Family Focus and Fleetwood Jourdain Community Center, where we had a great number of participants and performers as well. And what we're hoping to do from events like this is reach that untapped population, that disconnected or disengaged youth who don't always go to the preset programs. So also we're in the process of recruiting 60 young adults for our Career Pathways program, and we're just making sure that we're keeping our youth and young adults busy and trying to meet their needs as well. And now I'd like to bring Doug Gaynor back again.
Excuse me, Alderman Burris has a question.
Hi. Great job on the youth employment. I was wondering, you had a lot of applications.
Yes.
Do we know the students that were not offered positions, do we have any idea of if they got positions elsewhere? Do we follow them at all? I just don't know.
No, that's fine. Some of them we do know about and some we don't. There is no formal following procedure, though, if they don't receive a job through the program. No problem.
And they were great kids. I interviewed batches of them that we couldn't hire, and they were phenomenal.
That's what I was asking, because I had phone calls as well, and it seemed like there were many kids that were really qualified but didn't get hired, and so it would be great if, I know obviously you're probably doing referrals to other
of course.
agencies, but just wondering our follow-up. Thanks.
No problem.
In addition to that response, Alderman Burris, we do refer a number of folks to the Youth Job Center, who has an ongoing program year-round. So if they didn't get the letter accepting a job in our program, we did at least refer them to the Youth Job Center. So that's one. The final slide we have here, I think, is an important slide to have you see. It represents a total of 506 young people that were hired by the city, whether it was youth employment or whether it was through in our camp programs. That's the total number of individual youth that we hired, ages 5 to 26-year-olds. Another important statistic is about 97% of those are Evanston residents. It does not include the contractual vendors that we hire. For instance, as you may be aware, we have a contractual agreement for a tennis instructor who then provides tennis. We pay him, he pays his instructors. Those instructors are also Evanston residents. So the number of Evanston residents that we hire in our programs, we're giving back to the community by they're paying their taxes, and then we're paying their kids to help us run the programs. So you can see it's been a very busy summer. It takes a great deal of planning on the half of the staff. These are the managers. Our payroll goes from about 125 to 130 from middle of September to maybe the middle of May, and then it jumps up to about 700 employees in the department, who are the lifeguards and the camp counselors and so on. So it's a real busy summer, and I want to thank the staff for doing such an outstanding job in conducting these programs this summer.
Alderman Grover, excuse me, Alderman Grover has a question.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Gaynor. It seems as if we're getting more traffic in our open gym times, that unstructured, video-free, self-negotiated kind of time in just open gyms, drop-ins, I think you called it. Is there a way that we could work more of that into our gym schedules if the numbers are going up for the drop-in time? There seems to be a demand for it, and a lot of times I think, from my experience, that that's the best kind of playtime, unstructured, without videos, it's active, and kids have to negotiate their own rules without too much, adult management.
Yeah, it's the structure that they don't want.
Right.
Is what I think you're describing. And yes, the answer is yes, we can do that. For a long period of time, we were focusing on structured programs that generated significant revenues. And we made a considerable switch in our philosophy, and we've opened up the gyms, and this is the result. And that's something that we're going to continue to do as we go through and evaluate the programs that we conducted this summer, what went really well that will enhance, what was maybe medium as far as acceptance, and should we keep it or enhance it or get rid of it, and then those that didn't work, and what we'll do with those. So
it would seem to me there'd be a lot of overlap between the open gym users and our fee payers, users of our recreation centers too.
Well, interestingly enough, not so. I think that we found that there were, for instance, at the noon hour, we wound up where we didn't have any structured programs, any activities, with a lot of young adults, 25 to 30, that were coming in playing basketball for an hour and a half, 2 hours. These are, for the most part, maybe young adults that are unemployed and just didn't really have anything to do, and all of a sudden it became available to them. And is just one example. So.
Right, and then as Mrs. Jenkins said in the evening at Fleetwood Jourdain, we had many more users for the open gym time there.
Right.
Another thing that occurred to me, as Mrs. Jenkins said, there was a referee training program at Fleetwood, and that's all potential job opportunities too. If we could kind of bring together what AYSO, Team Evanston do to train referees, I think they offer employment for young referees. EBSA has an umpire training program. And some of that can lead to then earning a patch through IHSA, the Illinois High School Association, which gets you into a higher pay grade for each one of those athletic events that you officiate. And even if a formal job doesn't work out, as my son found, it was a really great source of income for him to umpire. And if he's umpiring with an IHSA patch 5 games a week, that's significant income. And it wasn't the time that I really wanted him to be working, but it was, for him, great income. And I think it brings in the leadership skills, intellectual health, mental health, and it plays into what a lot of our students already know, which is the game. So if you put them in a leadership position with the right training, I think it's a good filler for job opportunities.
Yeah, and I think the expansion of that is something we're looking at. Last year, in fact, we tried to develop a life-saving or lifeguard class at ETHS. It didn't go. We've been talking with, Bill Stafford and the AD at ETHS to see if we can, again, get pool time and see if they can push some of the young folks a little harder to get into the program, especially those of color. We don't have many lifeguards of color that work at the lakefront, and we want to increase that opportunity, but they have to be totally qualified. And without going through that program, getting those certificates, then obviously we can't hire them. So we're making that. I think another one, what I think you'd probably get a little kick out of this, is I've been looking at a Learn to Caddy program.
And there you go.
For golf. And where that came from was my grandson has been caddying all year.
So where you might not make the junior varsity baseball team, you can still be on the field but earning money doing it, playing a game you love, or you don't make it onto the high school basketball team, go through officiating, and you know the game after playing all those years and get back on the court. Yeah, it's all potential.
Alderman Holmes.
Mr. Gaynor, the very last slide, you mentioned the 500, I think it was 506 or?
Yes.
Was that youth?
Yes.
Or just all youth?
Ages 5 to 26. 15. Whew. I just broke every labor law in the world. 15 to 26.
15 to 26 that were employed.
That's were the ages of those that were employed, of the 506.
Okay, and then we have 543. I'm just doing a little arithmetic like Clinton. Okay, all right. I'm just, in terms of the number of youth that we had applied for positions this year and the number of kids that we actually employed in overall in your department, and I'm wondering, is that, I believe it was 175 that came out of summer youth. Is that number included in that
Yes.
506?
Yes, it is.
Okay, so that means that we deduct 175 out of that 506, and then that means that number of kids did not come through our process of the summer youth program.
No, they didn't. They applied for these jobs through the HR department as we had put out recruitment bulletins.
Okay, so then we need to do a little, okay, all right, thank you.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Mr. Gaynor.
Well, thank you for giving us this opportunity.
Madam Mayor, the next item after the presentation is an action item regarding the Building Career Pathways to Sustainable Employment pilot initiative with the Youth Job Center. Staff is recommending that we move forward with this initiative. Mr. Darnick or Mr. Brown are here. They could answer any questions that the council may have.
Does anyone have any questions? Alderman Burris.
I know we have the lovely executive director from the Youth Job Center. I was wondering if we could hear from you, if anything.
Commonplace for me these days. The only thing that I have to really say is I just wanted to commend the Youth Services Department for really working hard to get this initiative in front of the City Council. I think it's a very necessary and meaningful program. We currently have a Career Pathways to Sustainable Employment at the Youth Job Center. Part of it is funded through workforce development funds, which are WIA funds, and the other half of it, because of the results of the WIA funded program, is supported by a few private dollars. And what it does is not only does it just put a young person in a work experience, it ties them to earning a credential, a state recognized credential, then the work experience, and then permanent placement with the employer. The critical piece of that is we have employer buy-in. So I think to try this program out with the City of Evanston would be very beneficial and hopefully yield the same successful results. That's it.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
On page 7, there's a mention of 60 individuals that would benefit from the program. Have we selected the people who are going to be part of this program yet?
We have not selected the individuals. We have narrowed it down to a group of individuals that are probably the ones that we would consider most highly to place in the program based on the work that our outreach workers have done in meetings already with individuals who have expressed an interest.
They've got a list.
Yes,
They've got
we
a
do.
list. How is the selection going to be made? I'm real curious about that. And how do we replace? I mean, obviously, not everybody's going to get through it. I mean, that would be wonderful. And how will those people be replaced? So tell me first how you're going to select.
So we have, based on a number of best practices, actually written a plan where we would develop a steering committee, and steering committee members would be made up of our partners in the Youth Job Center, our staff with the Youth and Young Adult Division, and community members. I haven't developed it further to see if we would add additional people, and if council would like to participate or provide recommendations regarding the steering committee, we would hear those recommendations.
How many people are you thinking of having on a steering committee? Was that in our paperwork?
No, that was not. That was actually in a plan that we have developed that we actually wanted to share, but it was not ready to be shared yet.
So there's a steering committee, but how will you vet the individuals? What is the steering committee going to do?
So the steering committee, the Youth Job Center has a vetting process. It's a process of intake for their current Career Pathways program. And what we are doing is expanding the program from the current program that they have is 18 to 21, and our program would be 18 to 26. And we would utilize the existing intake process that is currently used by the Youth Job Center.
And why did you go up to 26?
The WIA funds that were mentioned earlier only cover an age range of 18 to 21.
Right, but why are you going to 26?
We're going to 26 because the White House Council on Opportunity Youth, and I think that's mentioned in the documentation, or
Might go
24.
24?
Well,
The White
that's
House-
24.
Right.
But
Why
when
are we going to 26?
Yeah, when we look at the employment data, pardon me?
The department and the city, if I could.
Okay.
Just sorry, Kevin. If you go back to the initiatives and the goals were of the city to identify individuals to age 26 when we worked through the youth and young adult program goals last year.
I didn't agree with it then, I still don't, but anyway, so it's going to be, can you give us some idea of how the people in your Pathways program are now selected? What are some of the things that you look for?
So there is a pre-screening process. So once individuals are referred to the Job Center for the specific career pathways program, a lot of it is based upon the needs of the employers because they determine the types of credentials, the skills needed, and the opportunities for permanent placement. All prospective candidates are responsible for going through a 12-day extensive workshop. This is critical to see if the person has some level of self-motivation and is serious about participating in the program overall.
So just one quick question about that. Do you send more than the number you're going to select through that program? So that if not everybody makes it, at least everybody will have been through the workshop?
60, the number that the city has,
That will go through the...
60 is what I understand to be the pool of applicants. And 60 would be wonderful if we got 100% of anything, but nobody has 100% success anywhere.
But you will put the
But
60
we will,
through to draw from that.
not the entire 60, just those who meet the initial criteria, age, high school diploma. They need to have a high school diploma. And with the intake, as I mentioned, with the intake procedure, there is an assessment which measures skills, aptitude, and abilities, all of which is part of the intake assessment. We're not just funneling people through just because it's 60 individuals and all of them go through. If it is someone who is deemed not appropriate for the Career Pathways program, we will make the appropriate referral to outside agencies that we work with, because we also believe in linking and leveraging is what we're doing now. Okay.
Thank you. Just so that we can continue the discussion, I'll move to authorize the city manager to execute an agreement with YOU to expand our career pathways
Youth
program.
Job Center.
Youth Job Center, excuse me. Youth Job Center. It's right in front of me. This would be for both men and women. Am I correct?
Yes.
It's geared for both men and women. I'm glad for the partnership with Youth Job Center. Good to see you.
Thank you. You too.
And the memorandum was really well done, I thought. It was great to have that additional background information in the context of other programs, that this is a best practices. It was, I thought, really good information in it. This is also focused on our Evanston residents. And according to the data, oh, I'm sorry, was there a second?
I'll second, yeah.
All right. I had moved right on to my questions.
I know.
This is focused on Evanston residents, and according to the data, these are our residents who are more than likely going to stay in their hometown for the rest of their lives. So we're investing in our own people at a critical juncture and wanting to get job training for them to where the jobs are. So it's not just job training for its own sake, but rather job training for a specific purpose. So I think this is great, and like I said, I'm glad for the partnership with Youth Job Center.
Thank you.
Thank you. I just wanted to express my confidence in the program. I've had the pleasure of working with the Youth Job Center for 4 years, fundraising in the last 4 years, and spent a lot of time there and interacted with the mentors, mentees, seeing the work environment that is second to none. It's a very, very positive place for these young people. And just say that I really support this because I largely support Youth Job Center.
Thank you.
Alderman Holmes.
I just wanted to speak to the number 60 because I think we need to be really clear that that's the number now. That number will grow. These are young people that have been identified, disengaged, young people who could benefit from this program. That number may be maybe this time in 3 months, that may be 100 plus. And all will not be able to go through this because there's only a certain amount of funding. But that number is just not going to always be 60. I just want us to understand that. And that is an ongoing number as the outreach staff continues to engage, disengage young people in our community that could benefit from this kind of program. It will also give us a pool when people don't make it to go back and pull from that pool to get other people back into the program. So we're real clear on that.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
Well, only 15 are going to go through the program. Absolutely. I mean, that's a very few number compared to the 60. My question was, are we going to let most of the 60 go through, if they meet the criteria, go through the workshop, because not everybody will end up coming out of the workshop. So that was my point.
Oh, okay.
I mean, this is open, right? It's going to be inclusive, not simply focused on minorities. It'll be for
It's open.
everybody.
We're an all-inclusive agency. So
And is the list closed if we know people who have no idea this program is going on that we think could at least benefit from being put on the list? Could we forward them or refer them to you?
Absolutely. If you do have names or individuals, we would definitely like to receive that information.
Because I really didn't know to do anything about this. I mean, I had no idea, so I would like to know. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Nguyen?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm very supportive of this. When several of us from the City Council were in Washington, D.C. for the National League of Cities conference in March, I believe Alderman Grover and I attended several sessions specifically on workforce training and workforce development and discussions about successful programs in a number of other places in the United States which did precisely this, trained for a skill that was tied to a job. And these were programs from all over the United States where employers had been identified, skills had been identified that they needed, and then potential employees were identified, and then there was the possible promise of a job at the end if the program was successfully completed, and it was in many, many instances. So I think this is precisely on target for what we need to do.
Thank you. Alderman Burris?
Hello again. I just wanted to say I've been very impressed with the YJC staff. I've been working with them on the WILL program that they've received funding for, and many of you probably know Precious Wright, who used to be with ECDC, is now the program director for WILL. Yes, I don't know exact title, but I've just been very impressed with their implementation of the program. I'm one of the mentors for two of the girls in the program, and watching them develop over the last year has been really impressive. So I'm confident that your staff will do just as great with this program as well. So thank you for everything you do in the community.
Alderman Grover? Oops, and Alderman Braithwaite hasn't spoken.
I was going to call the question, but
Alderman Grover, go ahead.
My one last question is, how do we measure the success of this program, and how often will we measure?
I have ideas, but wait.
I'd love to hear from both of you. Yeah.
I think that we have certain benchmarks in place to measure the success of our current career pathways program, which includes, because it's a continuum of services versus just putting someone in a work experience for 200 hours, but it involves, after the first benchmark is successful completion of the mandatory workshops, evaluations on the work experience itself, enrollment. They have to be enrolled in whatever program that is going to allow them to obtain that credential and successfully complete the credential, the certification, whether it's a, CDL training or a 6-week-long patient care tech training. That's a benchmark. Successful completion. Employer evaluations is another piece of it. Above average evaluations, and just as Alderman Nguyen said, the goal is at the end of this training, there is an opening with a company that person has, did the work experience and specifically went to school and training for. But if not, they will be credentialed, and the career advisor will be able to place them in the similar industry, which is key. And so I would think that the city and the Youth Job Center staff would be in constant communication, measure progress monthly, discuss challenges, amend any issues if there are some challenges along the way, be able to present a quarterly report to the City Council to update you on progress, outcomes, and how the program is doing.
Okay, Alderman Braithwaite, I'm going to take one more question from Alderman Rainey, and then I think we'll be ready to vote. Alderman Rainey.
I'm curious, the amount we're being asked for is $80,000, not to exceed $80,000 for FY 2012. What is the next amount we're going to be asked for? It's a 24-month program, right? There's only 6 months.
This is first a 6-month. This is a pilot program, so we do not have an amount yet requested.
But it's a 24-month program.
That is correct.
And for the balance of 2012, we're being asked to allocate $80,000.
That's correct.
We don't know the amount going forward?
The program, actually, this part of the program for the 15 individuals, the cost is approximately $80,000. That will run through February of 2013. The program then continues, but the primary cost is up front.
Okay, so it's $80,000 for the 2 years. It's the total amount for the 2 years.
That is correct. Yes, it is.
Because it says right here, not to exceed $80,000 for FY 2012, which those of us who spend the money up here know that that means for 2012.
Right.
But you're saying it really should say for the 24 months beginning now.
That is correct.
Okay. Right. That's all I have to know.
Thank you. Seeing no further lights, City Clerk, would you call the roll? We're voting on approval of the 2012 agreement with the Youth Job Center of Evanston, building career pathways to sustainable employment pilot initiative.
Alderman Braithwaite?
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen?
Aye.
Alderman Wilson?
Aye.
Alderman Holmes?
Aye.
Alderman Tendem?
Aye.
Alderman Grover?
Aye.
Alderman Rainey?
Aye.
Alderman Burris? Alderman Fisk? 9-0.
9-0, the motion passes. City Manager.
Yes, Madam Mayor. The next item pertains to the January 2012 Police and Fire Pension Actuarial Report. As you know, the Council received and approved the report at your last meeting, but left open the question of the funding amount for next year. As has been previously discussed, the actuarial report recommends funding at a level that is $700,000 less than we are currently spending in the current fiscal year. I'm asking the Council, if you would, be so kind this evening to discuss this item, and if you wish to fund at the actuarial level, then no action is required. If you wish to fund at a different level, I would ask the council by motion to make that direction so we may include that number in the prepared fiscal 2013 budget.
Alderman Wilson?
I assume there's no presentation, right? We've already...
We were here to answer questions. The
Sure.
actuarial is here as well.
Okay, I would move that we keep the funding levels the same as they were last year.
Second. Oh, no.
No, you already get it.
You don't need three. You don't need 3 seconds.
Thank you. Anyway, Alderman Grover, or Alderman Wilson, are you done?
I had my light on first.
I am. I think I've already said all the things I want to say about it. It's the responsible thing to do. I do not, let me qualify that by saying, contrary to some of the comments that I've heard in the public, that does not mean I want to raise the taxes to cover that. So I presume that the city manager will take that into account in the work on the proposed budget.
Thank you. Alderman Grover?
I think Alderman Rainey beat me to the...
Sorry, Alderman Rainey.
Well, I asked when we decided to have this meeting that the actuary be present and give at least some part of the presentation the Administration Public Works Committee received. And that had to do with the difference it makes between funding his recommendation and going back to the previous year, why he made the recommendation that he did based on the conditions that we're confronted with. And I think that's very important. And what the public needs to know is the 3 bases for making a recommendation for the levy. His was by far the highest and exceeded the other 2 really codified types of recommendations that the state requires, that you do not go below those recommendations. And his is much higher than that, and a few dollars short. And I'd like to speak to the issue of specifically, before he speaks, just to remind people what it means. Just bear with me for a few minutes. What it means to add the additional dollars, which would total $687,297 to fund last year's amount. What that means is, if you're a small condo owner and your tax bill is $4,000 a year, and I've seen several bills like that, but I know there's a lot of people have higher bills. But there are people in this town who have that kind of a tax bill. 20% of that tax bill is about $800. So $800 of the $4,000 tax bill goes directly to the city of Evanston. That's what's been levied by the city of Evanston. It takes 859 of those condo owners to pay that amount. The levy amount, if you divide it up. If you have an $8,000 tax bill, that additional $687,297, if you devote the entire levy to that taxpayer, that takes their tax bill that goes to the city is $1,600, takes 429 houses or units to pay that tax bill, to pay for that increase in the levy, just the increase. If you have a $12,000 tax bill, it takes 286 houses, property owners, to pay that increase. Now, the current recommendation by the actuary is that we spend $14,235,837 levied against the taxpayers for this year's pension contribution. That's 33% of the total general fund levy. 33% of the levy, which is $43,400,000 $400,000 is the gross tax levy. Those people with $4,000 tax bill takes 17,795 homes at $4,000 tax bill to pay that. If you have the $8,000 tax bill, it takes 8,897 homes. And if you have a $12,000 tax bill, it takes 5,932. You're going to add 859, 429, 286 to those numbers. Enough is enough. You know, the mayor said it's only going to be about a 2%, whatever the number was. You know what? You keep adding 2% every year, and before you know it, you're talking real money, and you're talking more foreclosures, more people who can't pay their taxes. Every time we do an alley in this town, the community development block grant money has to pay so many of those special assessments because people cannot no longer pay one more penny on their tax bill. Enough is enough. By paying $14,235,837, doing exactly what our actuary tells us to do, is a very responsible thing. And somebody tonight said it was immoral for this council to act otherwise is just plain wrong. And that is immoral, to say something like that to a group of very responsible citizens who have been hired to run this city, who I am absolutely convinced we need to pay the greatest amount of all three calculations. And I'm ready to vote tonight for $14,235,837. And I dare them to say that's an immoral amount of money to pay. It is 33% of the total general fund gross tax levy. And I think for a community to do that is absolutely the most responsible thing in the world. So just because we have been misguided in the past and not paid the maximum amount of the three calculations, you know, that's awful. We're trying to catch up now, and we're not going to catch up that much at all. It's not going to be noticeable to burden another 859 homes or 429 or 286 homes with an increase to match last year's. And I really want to hear from our actuary to tell us that we're immoral by doing what he says.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey.
Welcome.
Would you like to speak now?
I have nothing to say.
Well, apparently you gave a dynamic presentation at ANPW, and I think we'll all agree that we're not immoral, however we vote on this.
Thank you for inviting me.
You don't have to speak on morality,
I do not plan on speaking on morality. I would rather speak with an extra T and speak on mortality than morality. I don't really have a response. The actuarial valuation was performed in accordance with sound actuarial principles. I have made what I consider to be appropriate assumptions as to the future. Please understand that they are assumptions. They are not predictions. This is what I believe with my training, that these are attainable goals over the long term. I am concerned about the youngest police officer and the youngest firefighter receiving their last pension payment, a period of time over 60 years. I'm not going to sit here and argue interest rate assumptions, mortality tables, rates of retirement, et cetera. That's above my pay grade, so to speak. My job was to perform the calculations which would place you on a sound track to be able to pay these pensions in accordance with the statute. That is the statutory minimum contribution that the state, in its infinite wisdom, has designed. I don't like that. I think that is a path of destruction for many pension plans because it creates an increasing contribution. And I believe it will become unaffordable to any municipality if they abide by the statutory minimum. As I have said on record, Illinois has the worst funded pension plans in the country, and I believe that they will take any steps that they can to retain that #1 ranking. The adoption of the funding method, which is essentially a budgeting pattern for the state systems and has come down to the municipal level, I believe is an improper funding method. What the state has done to essentially bastardize that method is not even actuarial, and we could spend an evening discussing what the New York Times referred to as well, I don't even know what they called it. It's just not a good methodology. The methodology that I use provides a level approach to funding. That doesn't mean it's the exact same amount every year. We try to measure our assumptions each year to see how they're holding up. Last year, we set these assumptions. This year, we tested them against true experience. I could say that we're right on the money. We're within reasonable tolerance of what we expected. Is that going to happen next year? I have no idea. I don't control the experience. The police officers who retire control the experience. The trustees who handle the investments and the salary increases are the major considerations in what occurs in next year. I can only say what I believe to be reasonable and what I anticipate will occur. Time will tell whether they're good or not. I don't know what you're asking me to do. It is your job to set a budgeting pattern. I have given you my recommendation. My recommendation is to solve and anticipate three things. Number one, to build up reserves for the current police officers and the future. Number two, to give the city a manageable budgeting approach, not one that will jump around year after year. And the third, which is everyone has said what I refer to as intergenerational equity, to have the current generation of taxpayers paying for the pensions that are being earned today and not passing off the costs to the future generations of taxpayers. I believe that that's what the recommended contribution is composed of. I'll be happy to explain it in more detail, but I really have nothing more to offer you. It's all in my report.
Thank you. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Tepfer. It's hard to know, as we've discussed before, what we're trying to catch up to when the goal line moves, when it doesn't feel as if the ground is moving beneath us. And maybe you can help us understand how your recommendations for the 22 pension payments help us move closer to whatever our goal is.
I can try.
To a responsible funding level.
Right, I can try.
Are we going backwards? I think is the concern among those who would not want to accept your recommendation, the feeling that because we're not funding at last year's level that we're going backwards.
I don't believe we are. Everyone sort of gets very excited about what percentage funded we are. That what was the term I heard? 54% underfunded or unfunded as far as that's concerned. The funded percentage is an index number. It's a quick ratio of the liabilities of the pension fund as calculated by the actuary using the assumptions selected by the actuary to the actuarial value of assets. The actuarial valuation of assets is a methodology that actuaries use, taking into account current market value, but also taking into account the fact that the market is not steady in one direction or another. So when we have a good year, we don't take all of it. When we have a bad year, we don't take all of that either, but instead we try to create a smoothing approach. So it is strictly a measure at a static point in time. This measure was done on December 31st of 2012. I think it's a good indicant of where we are. But it's not the only indicant. It is much more important in my mind that the city begin a pattern and to walk down the path of trying to get to a certain level. That level, by statute, everyone will be 100% funded in 2020. I mean, everyone will be 100% funded in 2033. I mean, everyone will be 90% funded in 2040. That is what the state has told us. I don't know what the next change will be. And by the way, that's really using the state assumptions as to what method it is. I don't know what percentage funded you are on the state actuaries' calculations because they haven't performed that calculation. So I don't get involved in what funded percentage means. I get more involved in how do we set a path. Going back to last year's number and saying that's a minimum discounts everything that's happened this year. This is the new number. The new number is what I've recommended. Is it accurate? I think it's reasonably accurate. These are mathematical calculations. It's the result of a series of equations. Is it accurate to the dollar? I don't particularly know. The math is right. I'll help you with that. I don't know what accurate means. I think that it's appropriate. I think that it's the right number to use if you are taking the approach that the actuary is trained in what this is, how this is supposed to happen. This is your group of people. This is where we are, and this is what he's come up with. More than that, I cannot give you. Had the assets been higher, we would be putting less in. Had the assets been lower, we'd be putting more in. But it's just an indicant. Going back to last year is probably okay, but it's not what I'm recommending. The number is the number to that extent.
And my other question would be then for Mr. Lyons, Mr. Bobkowitz, is how hard is it going to be to find $690,000 in whatever your draft budget is that we haven't seen yet for 2013 if we fund the pensions, if our contribution is at last year's level rather than as recommended?
Madam Mayor, Alderman Grover, members of the council, we continue to work on the budget. $700,000 is $700,000, and we can get it by either proposing raising revenue or cutting positions. I'm hearing from some members of the council you don't want to raise revenue. I'm hearing from other members of the council you don't want to cut positions. Really, it's a policy decision for the council that we're prepared to meet. We appreciate you taking the discussion tonight versus several weeks from now. That will give us a better, more thoughtful answer come October 12th. But I really believe it's a policy decision for the council, and I'll prepare a budget accordingly.
Does that answer all your questions, Alderman Grover? Yes, thank you. Alderman Burris.
I am for funding at a higher level, minimum of what we were funded last year, and for a variety of reasons. Probably the biggest one, looking at history. The problems in Evanston can date back to the early 80s, when the majority of the council, and I say the majority because I get frustrated when people say the council when it's very rarely a 9-0 vote on anything. So 18-0 vote or whatever it was. So the majority of the city council at that time made a decision to listen to actuarial assumptions and fund inappropriately, and not to the appropriate level that got us into this mess. And I'm not questioning your assumptions. Your sound actuarial principles and assumptions are appropriate. I don't necessarily agree with the 7%, but that's beside the point. I'm not going to dig through your report. I don't agree with all of it, but in the early 80s, the majority of the council made this decision. We're not going to fund where we will then pay for everything that we need to for fire and police pension. This has gone on for 3 decades, or nearly 3 decades. We are now $152.8 million in the hole.
Under my assumptions.
That's a huge hole.
Yes.
Huge hole. And my assessment is the council back in the early 80s was a penny wise and a pound foolish. They probably made the same arguments of we can't raise taxes, it's a bad economy, this is going to hurt people. Absolutely. I don't like raising taxes. I don't like cutting positions. At the same time, not until this current council came on did we take a stand and say, we need to do something about this fire and police pension. And we did raise taxes, and we've tried to go down the right path of getting us, the city, to an appropriate level. My fear is with your recommendation is that we are going backward, and we are doing what that council for the last 3 decades has done, and we've kicked the can. We need to draw a line in the sand and say we're going to stop kicking the can. We have an obligation to our fire and our police. We said we would fund this. We have no control over what happens in Springfield, or minimal control over what happens in Springfield. So I agree that should be fixed. I agree that the target keeps moving and is hard to hit. But we should do our very best at the level we can to hit the target that we know, we believe is appropriate, and we should not continue to go further in debt. If we do not fund a minimum of last year, we're just falling backward.
Last year was higher than this year?
Last year was higher. We funded more last year than we did. Than you're recommending. I'm sorry.
You funded more than my recommended last year.
Yes. No, we funded more than. I'm saying is you're suggesting we fund less than we did last year.
I'm suggesting that you fund my recommended this year, not
Right.
my statutory minimum.
Right.
My recommended.
Right. Yes.
Is that is a lower number than you put in last year?
Yes.
No.
Yes, it is.
No. We paid his recommendation
But-
last year, which is higher than his recommendation this year. That's what
Right.
you're trying to say.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
what I'm saying. Yes.
That is not going to hurt.
But the point is that the councils for the last 3 decades have heard the same thing out of actuaries, and we're in $152 million debt. I believe we need to make a stronger stand and stop being financially irresponsible.
You're effectively saying that my number is too low on a recommended basis.
Yes.
I have no problem actuarially with your funding all $152 million this year. That will get
That'd be
you
great.
to 100% funded as of December 31st last year. I will give you no guarantee that will maintain you at 100% funded next year. I don't know what the number will be if you do that. I would clearly say that my recommended is a minimum number that I would ask you to consider. If the council wishes to take the next step and fund a higher contribution, I would not ever tell you that that's wrong. I would feel honored. In fact, the number is the result of a mathematical exercise. We chose assumptions based upon what we have seen and experienced and what we anticipate to see. I want to address your 7% for a second.
Yeah, thank you. That's what I was going to go to. Yes.
If I may. While I was waiting for the 7 o'clock call, I happened to read an article from the Boston University School of Law, which just came out on the public pension crisis. And one of the things caught my eye was an analysis that was done that said over the last 20 years, the average rate of return on public pension funds, which you qualify as, and those are some of the very large ones included as well, has been over 6% for the last 20 years. True, the last 10 years have been much less. If we were talking in 1980, and I came to you and I said, I believe that we should be using 7%, I think the first reaction would be, but I'm earning 17% on my money market fund. Why shouldn't we be assuming 17%? We cannot let the current environment dictate the next 60 years of pension payments. These are discount factors. We're going to take that last pension and we're going to discount it back. If I use 6%, I will get higher numbers. Are they more correct? I don't think so, but they certainly are going to be higher. I can tell you that. You won't be 54% funded, you'll only be 44% funded because the liabilities will be larger. Don't let the numbers get in the way. If you trust the actuary, then we're going to embark on a path which I believe will be successful.
But the problem is that the councils have trusted the actuaries, and we're $154 million in debt.
You're $154 million in debt, probably because of perhaps of what things that other actuaries have done. I've looked over them, and they've been pretty aggressive on their assumed rates on some of the ones. I've commented on that, and I've been working with the police for a number of years. I believe 7% is an appropriate number. I wouldn't argue with 6 3/4. I might argue with 3. By the way, GASB is going to require that some of us, and I think that was pointed out earlier, GASB is going to require that you put on your books some of the pension liabilities for the existing pensioners at a much lower interest rate than the 7%. You're going to, no matter what you do, we have so many forces operating. You have to manage your city. This is the hardest job that I could ever think of. You're never going to make a right decision. I can guarantee you that. I speak to city councils virtually every week. I always say, this is not a job I would want. I can do the numbers. I've analyzed it. This is only my second year being here. We tested the assumptions last year. We came out with what we expected it to be. That was based upon the fact that you did have a higher contribution last year, but maybe the benefits were paid were a little bit more than we thought they would be. Maybe the salaries went up a little differently than we anticipated. Maybe one extra person retired that we thought might not, because these are not large groups and we can't itemize these things. So we speak in broad brushstrokes. Again, what I'm trying to say is the process is important and the path is important. If you want to put in more than last year, you're perfectly welcome to. I understand that that's a difficult choice to make. It's going to affect the taxpayers. Is it wrong? Absolutely not. Is it correct? Absolutely not. But it's certainly adequate and it's certainly appropriate to do that. Does that help?
It does a little. Thanks. Alderman Wilson.
Thank you. And sadly, nothing you say will help.
I can't let the numbers get in the way.
Right.
That's my problem.
And I don't question your report, I don't question your math, and I don't question your numbers at all. But we have a problem. And the question for me is, how are we going to address the problem? Are we going to aggressively pursue a solution to the problem?
What is your actual problem?
The problem is that our funding level, we can play games with the numbers. 54, 52, 40. It's not even in the ballpark. We're not even close.
What is required?
We're operating under a framework that's constructed by the state of Illinois, correct?
Yes,
correct.
That is the statutory.
To me,
right.
A framework constructed by the state of Illinois probably answers most of my questions, because the frameworks that are constructed by the state of Illinois have not worked well.
That is correct.
In fact, it's some of the worst frameworks on the planet.
I told you that they will will do anything to keep their number one ranking. I agree.
So I reject the frameworks set by the state of Illinois. And I think that we, as a council and as a city, should aggressively pursue a solution. And unfortunately, we can't write a check for the $152 million.
And I would suggest against doing that.
I would suggest against doing that as well.
Even if you were able to.
Right.
There is a municipality that is able to do that and chooses not to do that.
And we're not that.
We're not that municipality.
Again, sadly, we're not that municipality. But it's $700,000 ish. It's a lot of money. It's a little bit of money. Whatever you want to call it. You can play games with it's a certain number of houses, a certain number of condos, tax bills, whatever it is. But this boils down to a question of choices. And throughout the course of the year, we make choices. Okay. And we choose to do things like, the list is long, millions of dollars for parking lots, money here and there for facade improvements. There are a lot of choices that add up through the course of the year. And these choices wildly exceed the $700,000. And that has nothing to do with you. That has everything to do with the 9 people at the council, at the council table here. So I feel strongly that we need to aggressively pursue a solution, and unfortunately, keeping it at the same level as last year is not really that aggressive, but it's a little bit aggressive, and at least it makes a statement that we're not interested in taking steps back. And it's going to take a long time to get to the point we need to be at. And we can talk about, what these bills are going to be, but when you look at the projections, it goes up and up and up and up and up. And each year we're under 7%. It gets bumped up at a little bit higher tier, each of those projections. So I am interested in aggressive pursuit of resolving the problem, and that's why I think we should keep the funding at the same levels as last year.
If I may ask, what is the policy that you're adopting? Is the policy you're adopting that you'll take the same amount next year as well? Is that the approach that you're working toward? That last year was the baseline. Since this year was less, we'll push it to the 2011 number. If next year is less, again, we'll still push it to the 2011, and that's the way we're going to keep it? Or if next year's higher, do you then go to my recommendation and say, gosh, we really had a bad year in this small 3-year analysis, but this is what the actuary says? I'm just interested in what your approach is.
Well, generally speaking, to me, your suggested amount is a minimum. And again, like I said, I described it as an aggressive approach. I'm looking at that as the minimum, and if we're in a position to add to that to minimize the long-term impact, I think that we should be doing that. So again, like I said, my first comment was, I'm not questioning your report and your analysis at all.
And I appreciate that. I'm just trying to,
right.
I'm trying to understand, because if in 3 or 4 more years, when interest rates are still low, there's no way in the world we're going to keep a 7% return.
Right.
That's an assumption. We're going to lower it to 6 3/4, no doubt, and that is going to create an increase in a contribution. Just so you're aware of that,
right.
It's going to increase.
Right.
All right. I will still give you a recommended approach, which, by the way, if nothing changes, the amortization period and the unfunded liability will be a shorter period. So that there's going to be increases coming down the road. That's not to say that you're not correct in taking an aggressive posture now. I just want you to understand that these are not things that we can micromanage. These are going to happen, and I just want you to be aware of the fact. I don't want to be shot when I come back next year and say, gosh, the assumptions didn't work.
And I agree with what you're saying 100%. I'll liken it to somebody who takes their 30-year mortgage and they put a couple $100s a month in to pay it down.
It will reduce it faster.
It will reduce it faster, and if we are in a position to do that, and I think that we are if we make aggressive and more appropriate choices through the course of the year and with our budget, I think that we should make that choice now and try to improve our circumstances going forward.
That is why I am not in city management.
Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Tandem.
Thank you. And not to belabor the point, I think that, but it is a point that I can't get out of my head, is the number 7. 7%? 7%.
Why are we not questioning the mortality rate?
Yeah.
Well, that was the other. I mean, there are a number of things that Mr. Young mentioned that sort of go to that point. The activity of 10-year bonds may not likely be seen in the near future. We have more men, women coming into available for retirement. We have very limited retirement investment possibilities until the state changes something, and we can't really count on that. And
we have new people coming in, but they're coming in under a second tier, which is a lower ultimate pension.
Right. But I guess I just don't know why we're not. I guess I'm less optimistic than you are. I think I probably have put myself 5 years ahead when we actually will be looking at 6% or something, and wondering why we're not doing that now. And why? I mean, I don't see that bright a future ahead.
Help me. I believe a few years ago you were at 8%. 7.5. For a long time.
Yes, we dropped to 0.5 point in 4 years.
Again, the only tool that I have is 1 year's worth of experience, and to say that I did an experience analysis, which means that we see how our assumptions held up in aggregate. not individually. I can tell you, we didn't hold up individually. Investment returns were very poor. We smooth. Maybe next year they'll be a little bit better. I don't know. They've changed the investment opportunities for the funds. They can move into corporate bonds when they couldn't before. But I don't know. I'm not going to sit here and predict by any means. The only tool we have is to test where we expect the unfunded liability to be versus where it is. We were within 1%, I believe. We were at about 3% for the police, and I think we were at 0.8. I'm sorry, we were at 0.05% for the police, and we were at 0.86 for the fire. Less than 1% deviation from what we anticipated it to be. That's pretty good on a fund this size, with all of the forces that are operating. God forbid we're going to have a number of disabilities and everything's going to be screwed up. But that doesn't mean that I go change my disability table, because I look for trends. Now, I agree with you. I believe that 7% is not going to hold up very long, but it seems to be holding up now. If you want me to do it at 6 3/4 or at 6%, then you'll be arguing about how we're going to afford it.
Absolutely.
Because it's not going to be, what did you say, 1/3 of the budget? It's going to be 50% of the budget. That can happen. We need to build up more assets, and you need to manage the city as you can. And you need to manage it with budgets as what is your job to do. And that it means salaries as well. This is an employee cost. There's no question about it. But you need a certain number of police officers and a number of firefighters, and they have to be paid certain amounts. So it's not just an isolated instance of what the pension contribution is. I understand everything you're saying. I just want you to know we're not going to solve that by changing an interest rate from 7% to 6 3/4 or 6.5. That's just going to cost more money right now. Maybe in 5 years, you're going to have more money. I don't know. We have a public pension crisis. Yes, we understand that. I'm trying to protect it. But I'm not going to be here and sit here and insist that this number is the only number that you must put in. This is a number I recommend.
Right.
Putting in more is obviously going to produce, it's going to be good. Can you afford it? I can't answer that question.
I understand. I just wanted to ask the city manager if, when you do go back, if we are to recommend, even funding from last year, level funding, will you give us options? Will there be, or will we have to, or not have to, we'll have to make some choices, but will there be different scenarios that can be presented to us with that increase or that level funding?
Alderman Tennant, members of the council, has been my practice. I try to give the council a recommended budget and then a list of additional adjustments that you can make, which will be the plan again this year.
Alderman Tennant, are you finished?
Yes.
Thank you. Alderman Holmes?
Well, I wasn't here in the 80s, so I'm not sure what they did, and I think it might have been the same all over, because I think this pension crisis is not just in Evanston.
Oh, no.
So I think maybe they were listening to, whoever they were listening to, Evanston was doing the same thing. I look at things very simply. You've helped me understand over these last 2 years more than I've ever wanted to know about any of this. So believe me, and that is a compliment. Believe me. However, I've listened to now 2 councils, this one and the previous one. I'm in my second term, in terms of I want to say concerns about how we spend money. Sometimes it's on consultants, choices that we make, and Alderman Wilson is right. We always have to make the choice. But one of the things that I have learned in going into my 8th year is that we pay a lot of money to staff and to consultants to come and give us advice. And I'm learning to listen to that advice. So I am certainly I'm looking at the memo, which says the staff recommends that we accept. And I see the 3 names from our city assistant city manager, and also representatives from the police board, as well as the fire pension board. And I'm going to accept that. And I know that I don't want to have to make big choices about cutting positions or programs again. We've had enough pain of that for the last 5 or 6 years. We've been doing that. And if we have to make another choice next year, like we did last year, which I think was bite the bullet and make sure that we put in extra money to be physically responsible as well as morally responsible in terms of taking care of those who take care of us, I'm willing to do that. But this year, I'm willing to accept the recommendation of the report as it stands. So that's how I'll be voting.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey.
Well, first of all, before I talk about the pension, I want to explain to Alderman Wilson that I was playing no games, and my numbers having to do with property taxpayers had nothing to do with the pension, but had to do with the burden that some are willing to place on our taxpayers based on the increase amount of funding that you want to put in. So had nothing to do with the pension, it only had to do with the tax increase. The numbers are real, anybody can check them, and they're awful. They represent an awful amount of money for people who cannot afford it. There are people who are looking at their tax bills and seeing that the assessor is finding the value of their property being in the area of $700,000, and their insurance company is telling them that the value to rebuild their houses, and these are several cases that I've seen lately, $450,000 for their properties. So, I mean, there's a great disparity out there, but the problem with the disparity is it burdens the homeowner when it comes to the tax man and the tax woman. So I think the problem our actuary is having is, why are you selecting last year's number? If you want to pay more, why not just say 500,000? Why not say 700,000 or 300,000? Because the last year's number was based on formula and based on facts and based on statistics. And just picking, it's like just picking a number out of the air where we're going to pay what we paid last year. It really has nothing to do with the facts. Yes, it has to do with wanting to add more, but to be focusing on what it was last year is really not very factual. So it's just a number. There are a lot of moving parts to the formula, and I think we ought to start thinking about all of them. I know there's legislation, but I mean, let's think about this. There are more people receiving benefits in our pensions that we're talking about now than who are paying into it. I mean, that's a factor. What about the amount, the 1% plus of pay that's being contributed? What about the amount being contributed by those with the pensions? Maybe somebody ought to start thinking about, maybe we ought to raise that number. Somebody ought to raise that number. I mean, let's think about it. But harping on the 7% only adds a bigger burden to all of us and our constituents. You drop it down to 5, then you got to pay more, because the less that's generated by the fund, the more we have to pay.
City is the balancing item. That is correct.
It's really, if you try and pull it down, it's a very simple concept. It's very simple. We have to pay what isn't generated by the fund. So, I know talking about the 7% is kind of sexy, but it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything. It only means a greater burden. Why don't we raise it to 8%, and then we won't have to pay as much? So I just think that there is no way we're going to find $600 and some odd thousand in our budget to cut. No way. And I'm telling you right now, when we get to the bottom line, when we start voting on that budget, if you think this is the only addition that's going to be added to that budget, you are so wrong. You are so wrong. So we're probably going to be looking at 5, 6, 7%. We could be looking at that, especially if you start adding all the new fees. And I don't mean parking fees, because things like water, sewer, whatever license fees, whatever fees we add that people absolutely have to pay. We're just killing our town. When you look at those foreclosure reports that we get every month, we're starting to see our friends on there, people you never thought would end up in a foreclosure, and it's just getting burdensome, and we have to put a stop to this. We've got all this affordable housing that we've got on the market right now. You just wait. You just wait till the assessor starts taxing those properties, appraising those properties. I know they're affordable housing, but people who are qualifying for them are not going to be able to pay I'm thinking $8,000, $9,000, $10,000 a year on some of those properties. We're gonna get it thrown right back in our lap, and we're gonna be so sad and so embarrassed. So don't accuse me of being immoral, and don't accuse me of playing games. I'm trying to watch out for my constituents who are really suffering, much more than the pension fund is suffering. Let's do the responsible thing and do what the people we're paying, like Alderman Holmes said, we're paying them. I don't think we're going to need your services next year. We'll just pay next year what we paid this year. I don't see why. Not to mention, that brings up another point. Have you ever seen the non-pension related expenses in the police and fire pension funds? People are flying to Hawaii, people are going to conferences. Yes, I'm sure a lot of that is required, but I would think this day and age with pension funds so strapped that there must be online programs for people. I think it would be the consultants, the advisors, et cetera. The pension funds spend a lot of money on things that have nothing to do with generating a benefit. So I think we are absolutely loyal, responsible aldermen to vote for the current recommendation.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey. Alderman Nguyen?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I am going to agree with Alderman Rainey and Alderman Holmes in this instance. I do think that we have hired the actuarial. I agree with partially with Alderman Burris in terms of city councils of the past listening to the actuarials. Other things also contributed to this number being so large. A state legislature after state legislature deciding to alter the pension requirements without consulting with the municipalities, lowering the retirement age, increasing benefits. Those things also happened over the last 30 years. But I do look at what would happen if we had to cut $687,000 out of the budget. I don't want to lay anyone else off. I don't want to cut off any other service. I also don't want to have to raise property taxes. So I think that we have hired the actuarial for a purpose. I've listened to your discussion about coming up with a path, because all of this is it really is a continuum that we're on.
That is right. It's a continuum, and I measure at a single static point.
Static was a word that,
in a dynamic environment.
And actually, static was a word that came to my mind during your discussion, that we're trying to come up with, we're trying to pin down all of these variables as to a static point when they're fluid. And what the key is the long horizon.
Exactly.
And
but don't come back next year and say that the actuary was wrong because we have to put more in next year. That's what I dread. I mean,
we wouldn't. I mean, as Alderman Rainey says, we may not need to hire you, but I think that.
Then I don't agree with.
But I do think
that won't save
when I look at $700,000 and the fights that we've had and the terrible struggles that we've had on this council over smaller amounts than that, and realize how much we already have reduced and cut back our staff, and it can't offer as many services as we once did. I don't want to to reduce any further the city services. I also don't want to increase the tax burden and on anyone anymore. I don't consider these choices moral or immoral. They're choices. They're public policy choices that we all are making. So my choice is to follow your recommendation, because my choice is not to cut $700,000 out of our budget. I think ultimately this pension problem that we have is actually insoluble from our standpoint. I think it has to be solved by the state legislature. They were huge contributors to this problem, and we can try to tread water in this and not let ourselves become swamped. But I think ultimately, I don't know that we will ever be able to completely solve this on our own, given what our economy is at this point. I don't think we should slip into that position that some municipalities are in, where they can't take care of the current retirees. Obviously, that's unacceptable. But I think the solution to this has to come from Springfield. And as much as we look at Springfield and think they'll never change, maybe I'm a little bit of an optimist. So, I would, I go with our actuarial.
Thank you, Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Grover.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I agree, Alderman Nguyen, that I don't think the entire solution is in our hands. We can make progress, however, and as you said, Mr. Tepfer has reached a conclusion based upon actuary science, which is the basis for his recommendation to us. Funding at last year's level really picks an arbitrary number. And I'm wondering if there's any room to find a different arbitrary number for us that will have less of a repercussion for the 2013 budget, but still put us ahead of Mr. Tepfer's recommendation for funding level. Is there something in between that's not quite $700,000 of budget repercussions that might still accomplish what we all want, which is to avoid a tax increase, but yet make progress on our funding levels? And I'm serious that the 2012 funding level from an actuary's perspective is entirely arbitrary, because the number that we're really talking about are the numbers that are his recommendation based upon that moment in time, based upon everything that Mr. Tepfer knew and analyzed. Yes, sir. Professor Tepfer.
No, please. At the risk of complicating the problem, had I come up with a number of $100,000 more than last year, would that have solved the problem or confused it more? Because it's just a mathematical exercise, and I'm trying to understand where you're at.
Exactly.
We wouldn't have known what to talk about.
Alderman Tandem.
Thank you. Just for the record, I have no sexual attraction for the number 7. I think we know where I stand. To me, it's just the most glaring of the assumptions, and I think it will be the first assumption that we see to change somewhat drastically. So,
the Society of Actuaries has published a modified mortality scale to the RP 2000 mortality table, which I'm investigating as to whether mortality improvement is true in the police and fire arena. We don't have enough statistics at this point. Secondly, with the new second tier that is coming in, the normal retirement for many of these people will be later than it currently is, and we don't have enough experience to decide whether we should be moving our retirement ages upward from where they are now. So while I tend to agree with you that the 7% number does sort of stick out, it is not way out of line if we look at large pension funds. And this is a reasonably large pension fund for a municipality. I have other funds. My bottom range right now is 6.5, and that's for funds which are just starting out, have less than $2 million in assets. You know, the people will rely on an Ibbotson survey that was published about 5 years ago that said that a portfolio invested 45% in equities and 55% in fixed income should earn 8% over the long term. 7% is conservative, according to that survey. And that's just a few years ago when that survey was published. My comfort range is 6.5% to 7.5%. I have no funds which are higher than 7.5%. I have other funds, no funds which are lower than 6.5%. And those are the $2 million funds, because my time horizon, and please, I have to stress this, my time horizon is 60 years. Get me investment people who will come in here and say, I've analyzed the next 60 years, and here's what you should be using, and I will listen very, very carefully. I won't believe them, but I'll listen. We don't know. So it's a long-term strategy. It's what a well-managed portfolio should do. Their job as trustees is to go out and get the best investment return they can with the amount of risk that they're willing to accept. As long as they do their job and award pensions as they come due, applying the statute, that's their job. My job is to come up with a funding approach, and your job is to determine what the funding should be. And that's as simple as I can make it. There's no right answer. There's wrong answers, but there's no right one.
Thank you. We have 2 more lights on, and it is quickly approaching 10 o'clock at night. So I would remind you that we still have goals to discuss and an executive session. Thank you, Dolores. Alderman Burris.
I think it's interesting we keep talking about cutting $700,000 from the budget, but if the $700,000 was in the budget last year, so why are we cutting it? And we're under the assumption that there's a budget taking out. We haven't decided on a budget, so how are we cutting $700,000? We're talking about the $700,000 as we're cutting something. That would make the assumption that the city manager and Mr. Lyons have already decided what the budget is without coming to us, and that they made the decision that whatever the actuarial suggestion is what we were going to go with without having the discussion. So I think this notion of cutting $700,000 and that we're laying people off and we're doing a tax raise makes it seem like we're not the decision makers, and Mr. Bobkowitz and Mr. Lyons are the decision makers. So again, we had $700,000 last year in our budget. Why are we talking about cutting and laying people off?
Alderman Wilson.
It's an arbitrary number, but it's an appropriate number. And I'm not just talking about, well, let me put it this way. It's choices. Everybody knows that. It's a question of choices. Last year, we found a way to give millions of dollars to private businesses. And I think that as a taxpayer, I am far more upset with giving millions of dollars to private businesses than I am trying to catch up on the pension obligations, which are a serious problem for our future.
Thank you, Alderman Rainey.
Well, this isn't in our budget. This amount is not in our budget. Our staff recommended an amount. We would be adding this, so that's why it's an addition.
We don't know what our budget is.
Well, but our staff they're making certain assumptions. I mean, they're not starting from scratch. Come on, they're not starting from scratch. This is a recommendation from our staff.
All right, City Manager, did you want us to? Have we completely confused you as to what our position is?
Absolutely not. And let me stress, there is no budget. But as Alderman Rainey says, we don't start from scratch. We've had a dedicated team of individuals at all city departments working for the last several months to coming up with a budget. So really, it's up to the council to decide, and we will come to you with a proposed budget that meets the requirements of the city council. So I believe, Madam Mayor, there's a motion on the floor to increase the dollar amount by $700,000 than what was proposed by the actual.
I have long since forgotten. Was there a motion?
Yes.
There was.
I want to amend it. I want to amend make a motion to amend his motion. I want to make a motion to amend his motion.
Who made the original motion?
Alderman
Don.
Alderman Wilson. And I want to go, and then the reason why I want to do this is going back to what Alderman Grover said. What I'm hearing from my colleagues is that we don't want to go backwards. So I would want to recommend that we add $200,000 to the recommendation so that we can at least be moving forward rather than the $700,000. Can I get a second on that?
Alderman Wilson,
I don't want to change it.
do you accept that? So do you want that as a substitute motion?
That would be a substitute motion then.
All right, Alderman Nguyen, you.
Well, I think Alderman Holmes has moved a step further than I was even thinking, because I can see that we're all struggling with this, obviously, and that I think Alderman Grover has a good idea to discuss coming up with an alternative number that's somewhere in the middle.
And that's sort of a third of it.
Right,
So that's
yeah.
why I did 200,000.
So I would second the substitute motion.
All right, the substitute motion has been moved and seconded to add 200,000, and I believe we have to vote on that before we vote on the, on your, yes, where's my parliamentarian?
It's moved and seconded. The substitute motion is moved and seconded. That is then considered first. If the substitute motion passes, then you're done. If it fails, you go back to the original motion.
Right.
That was my thinking, okay. All right, so the substitute motion is to add $200,000 to the amount staff recommends for police and fire pensions. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tendem.
No.
Alderman Grover. Alderman Rainey.
No.
Alderman Burris. No. Alderman Fisk. No. 3 to 6.
3 to 6, the substitute motion fails. So we're back to the main motion, which is to fund at this current level. City Clerk, would you call the roll?
Alderman Braithwaite. Alderman Nguyen. Alderman Wilson.
Aye.
Alderman Holmes.
No.
Alderman Tendem.
Aye.
Alderman Grover. Alderman Rainey.
No.
Alderman Burris. Alderman Fisk. It failed 4 to 5.
The motion fails. All right, City Manager.
Wait, I have a
I'm
motion.
sorry, Alderman Rainey.
Yes. Madam Mayor, I move we accept the actuary's recommendation for funding for the Police and Fire Pension Fund for the following year, for the 2012 levy.
It's been moved and seconded to accept the actuary's recommendation for the 2012 levy. City Clerk, would you call another roll? Take your
Alderman Braithwaite.
Aye.
Alderman Nguyen.
Aye.
Alderman Wilson.
No.
Alderman Holmes.
Aye.
Alderman Tendem. Alderman Grover. Alderman Rainey.
Aye.
Alderman Burris. Sorry.
No.
Alderman Fisk. Failed 4 to 5.
Well, I think our attempts to make this clear for you, City Manager, have certainly worked well.
And Madam Mayor, members of the council, may I make a suggestion? I clearly hear there's an interest to be as fiscally responsible as possible with pensions. There is a difference of opinion on how to do that. I think you have done all you can without seeing the rest of the city budget. So we will keep this in mind. We will do our best to present a budget to you that keeps this issue in mind. We will provide alternatives for you, and once you have the budget after October 12th in full, as Alderman Burris indicates, there is no budget. So I think we might as well, I think, I appreciate you trying this evening, but we'll go back and do our best and provide you, as we have every year I've been your city manager, a balanced budget, and we'll incorporate this into it as the best we can.
Madam Mayor, would it be helpful if I were to provide numbers at an alternative interest rate to show you the impact of what 6 3/4 would be?
That would be frightening.
It would be frightening. But I'd be.
That would be. That would be
What's the
helpful.
point of
yes.
that?
I'm sorry. Alderman Rainey's next, and then Alderman
I
Wilson.
mean, I wasn't going to comment on that. I was going to comment on the city manager's comment that there is no budget. I trust, given the October date is looming, there's some kind of a budget someplace. I mean,
But there is not a proposal I have made to my.
Well, no, of course there isn't a proposal, but I mean, even a small household has some vision of what's going to happen going forward. So I trust you.
And this is bigger than a small household. I do have a vision. You have
we know
clouded
you
it
better
somewhat
than
this
that.
evening, and I will go ahead and clean my glasses off tomorrow, and we will have a better view moving forward for October 12th.
Trust me, there's a budget.
Well, I brought this up at the last meeting, and I'm sorry to have confused you so greatly, City Manager, but you wanted this meeting to clarify it. And I just feel that the situation, I mean, you're completely right, everyone who says Springfield ought to solve this, and I'm heading down there again in November, but I just don't think they're going to do it. Alderman Wilson, did you want to say something? And then we really need to move to goals.
I appreciated your offer about the revised interest rate calculations, but I would be curious to see what the numbers would look like with an additional, say, again, I'll pick a random number, but if we made an additional $500,000 a year contribution, what those projections would come out looking at. Like.
What projections are you talking about? I'm sorry, I didn't understand.
If we put say we put in an extra $500,000 this year and every year, what would that look like?
That would involve having to do all kinds of projections. No,
let's say for this year. Let's say if we did it this year.
It would increase the actuarial value of assets probably by about $150,000, so it wouldn't change the funding very much because we would have higher assets. So I think that's what you're. I don't understand your question.
If we funded it,
if you put more money in, the fund next year will be different, not this year. The fund is where it is on December 31st of 2012.
Okay,
that's where it was.
Fine.
Alderman Rainey.
I'm going to propose for the budget that we include a certain amount of money so that we can teach aldermen how pension contributions are determined, so that people understand. I mean, because not everybody here understands. I mean, least of all me, but some people have just absolutely no clue how these numbers are calculated.
Thank you. On to goals.
Am I dismissed?
Yes, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Good night.
Madam Mayor, members of the council, it is a little before 10 o'clock. We do have an executive session. I proposed to the council this evening a discussion of 2013 city council goals. I had hoped to spend a little bit of time talking about our successes in many of these areas. I think you're familiar with the successes in many of these areas. I do want to say how proud I am of the city staff, that when you look at the 13 areas that we have been focusing on during 2012, I think in many cases we've done an outstanding job. And we've done an outstanding job, certainly by measuring it with our sister cities in Illinois, but even more so when you look at other cities around the United States of our size. I think we were able to accomplish more and focus on issues in a way that we'd be hard-pressed to find other communities around the United States that do that as well as we do. In my memorandum to you, I offered up a number of goals which I thought remain important priorities for the community and should be continued, and some changes. So perhaps I can just go through the ones that I believe we are still making progress on and we should keep in place, and that is the economic development goals. Again, I think the council is very familiar with those issues. Capital improvement program planning. While I think we've made progress, I still don't think we're as far as we need to be and think it needs to stay on the list to continue to have that focus. Efficiency and effectiveness of services, I'll get back to. Safety issues, we've done a lot in the past year at safety in all levels. I think there's been a particular focus this year on pedestrian safety, and I think we can be very proud of the work that's been done there. Youth issues, a good part of this evening was devoted to that topic, and I hope you will agree that we've made very good progress in that area. So those were the 5 areas of primary focus. The areas, additional areas, affordable housing, I'll get back to in a moment. The climate action plan. This is interesting because I think we've done a great job. I think it is a part of what we do, and under normal circumstances, I would probably suggest that we take it off. But we are really in a position to not only be among our peers, but really be among the forefront of all communities in the United States on this issue. And there are very few issues on this list that I think I can say that about. So I think it's important to keep it there, because I would hope every community, Evanston is one of them, can always point to a handful of things that we can be best in class in the United States, and I think our areas of efforts in sustainability are part of that.
Excuse me, Alderman Rainey has something to say.
City Manager, it was very interesting during our community development block grant proposal reviews. All of those not-for-profits who presented to us projects that involved any kind of sustainability or retrofitting or anything having to do with that, we all felt very authoritative by saying to them, you need to get in touch with Catherine Hurley. And they all said, we already have, that's why we're here. And so she has it didn't matter what it was, every single one of them had either been to a workshop or consulted with her or had direction from her. It was really quite interesting.
And you all need to know that the programs that she's working with, the collaboration she's doing, just aren't the best in Illinois, just aren't the best of cities our size. We're among the Portlands and the Austin, Texas, those communities. It's that level that we're performing at. So I encourage you, we leave it on the list, because I think we need to continue to celebrate it, continue to find partnerships, and continue to have it be one of the best programs in the country. Development Services and Design Review, Steve Griffin was before you at Rules a little while back, and I think there's still additional work that needs to be done there. In the area of innovation, perhaps I'll come back to the council on another evening. We've not talked a lot about that. I did prepare some notes with some good examples. We're doing an excellent job in most departments. There are some departments we still need to do some focus on, so I would encourage leaving it there. Northwestern University, I was struck listening this evening to all the various partnerships on youth issues with Northwestern that probably we don't always think about. There's lots of good linkages there. I don't know that we'll ever be in a place in the near term to not have Northwestern be part of this list as a priority. Police and fire pension funding issues, I think, speak for itself. Robert Crown Center improvements will be back to the council next Monday evening on the 24th with the next steps there. But clearly that's a focal point moving forward in the next year. Visual and Performing Arts, the work that we're doing with the Evanston Community Foundation on the arts roadmap that's starting up this week, the Harley Clark Mansion, the Noyes Cultural Arts Center, lots of heavy lifting. I'm sorry?
Howard Street. It's a theater at Howard.
When you talk about the arts.
And the Howard Street Theater,
yeah,
and the work that we're doing with the National Endowment of the Arts, and a lot of other good things that are happening. But it's all still work in progress. So I would propose that we leave all those on. One issue that I thought may be worth the council's discussion to remove is the area of affordable housing. We've made tremendous progress in this area. Upon my arrival 3 years ago, we had no infrastructure within the city organization to really effectively deal with affordable housing issues. Since then, the mayor's had a homeless task force that's made recommendations. Now the Housing and Homelessness Commission is in place doing good work. We've received the NSP2 funding. We have excellent staff, and Mary Ellen Poole and Jolene Saul working this issue. So if there were one issue that I would recommend that perhaps could come off the list this year, would be that. A second one is efficiency and effectiveness of services. Again, I think we've put into the culture of the organization, really with 311 being the lead point of that, but really a lot of other issues that we can talk about this evening or at another time if you'd like. I think that's part of our organizational culture as well. And then with those two potential deletions, I'm proposing that there be 3 additional goals, which are emerging issues in the organization that I think we need to look at. One is the area of senior programs. I think we're approaching a real critical phase in our senior programs. I don't believe we have given that the kind of attention and support that we need. Many of you attended the event at the Levy Center and really saw the wonderful work that's going on there. But that's really only the tip of the iceberg. I think the needs in the community and those needs continue to grow, and I would hope that we could, as a council goal, perhaps have that on there. A second issue that also continues to grow is at-risk individuals and families. Many of you remember Nancy Flowers, who was the senior ombudsman in the health department, a role that she played, but she also played another critical role, really being an ombudsman for all people at risk and in need in the community. With her departure, we reorganized the position. Audrey Thompson at the Levy Center continues the senior ombudsman piece, and she does an excellent job with that. But there are still individuals and families who are not seniors that we don't have staff support to provide, and I think that's an area we need to look at. And then the last area is services to our Latino population. We work very hard at this. However, it's a growing group of people with very diverse needs, and I think that an additional focus there in the coming years would make sense as well. With that said, if you recall, when we did this the first year, we hoped for 10, and I think we had 15. And then I think we went from 14, and now we're at 13. With the changes, I would hope that we would stay at the 13 range, because that's a reasonable number to get our arms around and provide that kind of attention for. So, Madam Mayor, members of the council, that is a quick overview of where we're at. I think the lion's share of these goals I would recommend the council continue. I would recommend that you talk a little bit about affordable housing, effectiveness, and efficiency of services. And then if you wish to remove any of those, would you consider adding? And if you did consider adding, I recommend that you think about senior programs, at-risk individuals and families, and services to the Latino population.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
City Manager, one of the things that I wanted to talk to you about in terms of efficiency and effectiveness of service is the great acceptance that the 311 program has been met with. However, I do think there's some very constructive criticism out there and ideas for the 311 program that I think could come out in maybe a focus group or something that is not written, a back and forth among users and staff.
That's not a back and forth?
Not a written survey.
Oh,
in other
okay.
words, a face-to-face
Sure.
focus group, some kind of
Like a town
interview.
hall or something like that?
Something like that,
Certainly.
yeah. Because there's some great ideas out there about how we could make it better, or things that we don't need to be doing, and I've just heard so many lately.
Certainly, we'd be happy to, we could do
Just
that
think about
regardless
that.
of what you choose to do with the goals.
Alderman Tendem?
Thank you. I would not like to see affordable housing disappear. I think it could be changed to meet what we're now calling our commission, housing and homelessness, and maybe quite possibly rolling in the proposed idea of at-risk individuals and families, if that's the main gist of what that goal would be to keep them in their homes.
Madam Mayor, Alderman Tendem, members of the council, in talking with staff and talking with, I've actually gone to the Mental Health Board several months ago with this kind of question to ask where their feelings were. Housing is absolutely a part of it, but I think there's a concern that it's greater than that. And we can fold this into the goals however the council feels appropriate, but I think it is more than just the housing. I think there are medical issues that we would want to give attention to, and we can do that in a variety of ways, and the goals shouldn't be a limiting factor just to get to a certain number. If the council wants to include it, we can include it, but I think we would want to keep it something separate.
So homelessness would be a part of that group?
I think if the council wished to amend the affordable housing so that it's housing and homelessness and can be consistent with the new name of the commission, that's perfectly fine. But if the council was concerned about those additional issues, additional at-risk individual and family issues, I would propose we make that something separate.
I think given the fact that we are going to have a health center open, that this might be a good time to have that be, because we'd have something to offer. So I think it might be a good time to add that goal. Alderman Grover.
Thank you. Mr. Bobkowitz, I agree with your recommendations to remove affordable housing and also efficiency and effectiveness of service. As to your 3 recommendations that we add, you phrased it in terms of services and programs to be provided, but when we're talking about our Latino population, at-risk families and individuals and seniors, it's more than just really services and programs. So if there's a better way of casting it so it doesn't seem as if we're the givers, they're the receivers, it's really more of an engagement of those demographics, those parts of our population in Evanston. It's different than just providing services and offering programs, I think is what you're getting at. And my question about at-risk families and individuals is, can we fold into that then our evaluation of township services, general assistance, emergency assistance, an evaluation of those programs, as well as the mental health board's allocations for human services funding, as part of the big picture of what funding and what services are available and how we are reaching out to our families.
And Alderman Grover, members of the council, I think what we've done in the past when we've added goals is we've come back and then had a separate sort of broad-based discussion on that. I've been to the mental health board, just for your information. I've asked them the question, hoping for an answer like you gave, and the answer I got was hire more staff. So, I would be happy to have the larger discussion, but I think staff is likely in that particular piece, because what's happening is our existing staff is being inundated by issues and problems that they don't have necessarily expertise for, and because of the time that some of these issues take, they then take away from, in essence, their day job. I think Nancy Flowers and her experience here is a great example where so much energy and time was taken dealing with people in crisis that the work with the seniors, while it still got done, there was an additional workload above and beyond that she took on in addition, which wasn't healthy for her, wasn't healthy for the organization. But again, as the council chooses new goals to add, we'll come back and have a fuller discussion with that.
All right. Does anyone have anything else to add?
Well, I've heard discussion. I haven't heard. I think there's an interest to perhaps have efficiency and effectiveness roll off the list. Alderman Zerani's point about, I think, sort of the longer term living with 311 and being mindful of reaching out to the community. We can do that separate and apart from goals. So,
does anyone have any problem with that? No. All right.
So that one is we can take off. Then the issue of affordable housing, I've heard one alderman suggest we leave it on with an adjustment to better reflect the direction that this council's given your Housing and Homelessness Commission now, and to leave it there. So is that the will of the council or not?
I think, I'm not trying to speak for Alderman Tindem, but I think that he just doesn't want it to get lost, and it's not going to get lost, I would hope, with our commission, the new group, and the work that will continue with the NSP2 housing and the other kinds of ways that we're looking to make sure that we can provide affordable housing to all families, in this community. So I don't think taking it off the list means losing it at all. Okay.
I don't think taking it off the list means in any way that we're no longer going to do a great deal of work in that area. I think it just means we think we're on the right track there, and that therefore we need to focus on other things and let good folk who are working on it do their good work.
And I'll take that as consensus then that we'll move forward there. Then that leaves the 3 new items. There seems to have been, I think, some interest among the council on all 3 on different levels. We could add all 3. We could add 2.
I think we should add all 3.
I think so, too.
They all need, and they should be, I see the idea of trying to amalgamate them, but I actually think they each have their own particular focus, and I think they should remain separate.
All right. So we'll go ahead and then add the 3. Then if you one last item, if you look then at the full list as a whole, and I don't know that Godwin's quite caught up with us at this point, but this past year the council felt it was important to have 5 issues that sort of stood apart, and those 5 issues were economic development, capital improvement, program planning, efficiency and effectiveness of service, safety issues, and youth issues. We've removed efficiency and effectiveness of services. So are you happy to leave those 4 then as your priority and then leave the rest? I'm seeing nods. All right, so we'll go ahead and do that. The last item, Madam Mayor, members of the council, for this evening is the issue of the economic development goal. This council has reiterated time and time again the importance of economic development in what we're doing. I think we've had a very aggressive year in the work of our economic development division, working with our community partners throughout Evanston in the area of economic development. The City Council adopted a economic development plan a few months back, which I think has been well received not only by this council but by the larger community. So I think that we're going on the right track. And my question really for the council this evening is, as we continue down that right track, the one piece that has become, I think, somewhat nettlesome at the council level is what resources are we applying in order to move these goals forward. I think all of you, my sense in talking with you, are comfortable from our staffing situation. As I think all of you know, Ms. Rakovich is leaving the organization at the end of the month. So with that position vacant, we do not plan to fill it with a manager. So we have 4 full-time staff members who I think are doing an excellent job with boots on the ground working these issues. We have 1 additional staff member who has been an intern, and we're going to propose in this budget that you'll see to convert that position to a fellow. As Mr. Chin has been a local government management fellow, we think that we could create a very attractive economic development fellow position, have, again, a recent master's graduate either in public administration or planning or finance come into the organization. So I think we're very comfortable with the staffing. Mr. Griffin and I will continue the supervision of the division. But in addition to that, where would the council like to go as far as making loans? Where would the council like to go as far as making grants? Where would the council like to go with the use of TIF dollars? We have helped, I think, all sizes of businesses in this past year. We have talked about loans versus grants. We have talked about the individual business districts. And then we also have the struggle about what we can do to be helpful to businesses in particular sectors, and I'm thinking specifically of the technology sector. We've had discussions about the Technology Innovation Center. We've had discussions of other entities in the community that provide assistance to businesses, and that assistance really boils down to 2 areas. One is to provide assistance with space, either making the space available at no cost, low cost, and creating an atmosphere of other like businesses in one place, and also these businesses looking for training, assistance, professional support to help them get going. It's my sense that that piece needs to continue to be part of our portfolio of support in one way, shape, or form. We have, I think, are coming out of a couple of year cycle where we have provided these organizations with sort of a flat dollar amount and have said to them, go forth and do good work. But this council, as you have become more interested, more engaged in some of these issues, you've said, well, wait a second, we want to be supportive of these activities, but we're not prepared to write a check without some goals, objectives, deliverables, return on investment that we can see from the investment of the money. So I think our challenge as your staff is that we believe we've got a wonderful team to move a lot of these issues forward, but we also question the role of cash support to individual businesses through grants or loans, or support through associations, incubators, different things like that. So if the council will allow some discussion this evening on that last point. If I'm wrong on the first points, please let me know. But my sense is that the real nut moving forward on the area of economic development is that second piece, and that is how do we use dollars that are in the Economic Development Fund, that are in the TIFs, to support businesses. So, Madam Mayor, if that would be all right to have, I see lots of lights lit up, so hopefully your colleagues agree that it might be worth something to talk about.
I think so. Alderman Burris?
Wow, I got my light first.
I couldn't tell, so.
That's okay. I think it would be helpful to get feedback, some research from our economic development staff on best practices in this field. I think we've gone all over the board on this in the last year. I think we've actually over the last 2 years in economic development, the Economic Development Committee have wavered from our swung from we're just going to give a grant with no documentation to we're going to give a grant with we want some documentation to we're going to do loans. We're again not consistent documentation on what that means for a loan. So part of it is we're not exactly sure what is the best way to go about doing this. So some help on that, and definitely standardizing what the criteria is, that this becomes more of a process that if we're going to become a bank, is basically what we're doing. We're becoming a bank for people that can't get loans anywhere else. And if we're going to do that, then we should have criteria like a bank, and we should require financial documentation, not just we like somebody, so we're going to give them money. That becomes a political process, not an economic development standardized process as a bank would do. So I think we need examples of best practices on loans. Just giving money to individual businesses, I think, sets a unequal standard, and it may help that one business. It may not. We really don't have also a measurement, a benchmark for what is our ROI on this. What are we looking for an ROI? We haven't set that percentage. So again, having a target to really talk about, because we don't have a target. It really bounces from ward to ward, and who's got other alderman's ear to get their project through their ward pushed through, versus really having, let's go through this tick list and say we need this financial, this is what the city's going to get out of this, not only a return on the investment, but how specifically is this going to help this part of the community. We don't do any of that, and we need to.
Thank you. Alderman Grover?
Thank you. I agree with Alderman Burris that it would be very helpful for our deliberation of these economic development issues to have a much better sense of what best practices, what other municipalities do, what tools they deploy to make economic development happen. And in Evanston, is it enough that we have staff on it, or do we have other tools in our economic development toolbox that we can use to retain, expand, and attract businesses, to nurture entrepreneurship, to create jobs and workforce? Is it just feet on the ground and staff at their desks making all of this happen? Or are there other resources, other assets even, that we can deploy in a smart way using criteria that can help us achieve our economic development goals? And I'm not sure, Mr. Bachwitz, that we have a really good idea of what a municipality can do, what role the city can play in making economic development happen. We've used a lot of these tools, a lot of these resources over the last 3.5 years without a bigger understanding, perhaps, of where they all fit into that picture. And maybe it's a primer on economic development, maybe and municipal planning that'll help us understand this, but perspective, I think, is going to help a lot in figuring out where we go with economic development and how we're going to make it happen. We have resources, and there's been a hesitancy on the part of a lot of us to deploy all those resources. But if we can understand what's most effective, what's going to pay off for us, and what are good long-term investments, that's going to help.
Thank you. Alderman Rainey?
On the other hand, I think we have made a lot of investments that will pay off, and I think our staff could probably write a primer on how to go about doing many of the things that we've done. On the other hand, what I intended to say was, isn't it time for another economic development forum where we bring everybody together up in the Parasol room? Isn't it time for that? And if it is time for that, I think this should be the focus of the discussion, because every time we have an applicant or who becomes a recipient or proposed recipient, we have some backbiting from the retail or commercial or manufacturing community saying, hey, wait a minute, why are they getting it and not us? So I really think we ought to open this up to the economic development, the people who make up that community, and see what they're thinking about it. I would really love to hear that, because on the one hand, we get fabulous feedback saying, you guys are doing a great job, this, that, and the other, and then you do hear the criticism that if I had known I could get that, I would have asked for it. So let's find out how we can do this fairly. I think we can.
Thank you. Alderman Wilson?
I generally do agree with all of those concepts. I feel like the way it's been implemented in the recent past has not been fair. I'd like to see us steer away from the cash grants, look more towards loan opportunities, particularly if it's in a funded TIF district. As far as loans or other grants, I think you also have to look beyond just what the city's return on investment is. I think you have to look at the impact on other private businesses. For example, Alderman Rainey just mentioned other people didn't know that they could ask for something. If we're going to give cash to somebody that's going to adversely impact a privately funded business down the street, that's probably not appropriate and it's not fairly applied. So getting these parameters in place is of great importance. And I also think it's very important to make sure that we budget in our annual budget a fully funded amount. So in other words, we're not borrowing money through the course of the year because somebody comes along with a good idea. I think we need to stick with our budget and live within those means.
Thank you. Alderman Braithwaite?
Thank you. I just want to follow up on Alderman Wilson with another thing we should take into consideration, which is the location. And I think for years, I know that Alderman Rainey has spent a tremendous amount of time and effort rebuilding Howard Street. And as one of the former residents, I applaud all of your efforts, and she's been very instrumental in helping me in trying to do our work on the west side along with Alderman Holmes. So I do think that there are some areas in town that are better developed than others, and I think particularly the west side, we still have much room to grow with all the vacancies that we have along Dodge Street, as well as the work that needs to be continued on Howard Street. I also just want to take a moment to compliment our staff, and I feel that our staff is truly our most valuable resource, and I think they do an excellent job going out there to get the word out in terms of the resources that the city has to offer, as well as vetting the process. I would also like to say that I do agree with Alderman Wilson. I would like to see us, in looking at the two past deals that have happened in the second ward, move to more of a loan process versus a grant process.
Thank you. Well, that explains it all. City Manager, Alderman Wilson, did you have a motion you wanted to make? No, I guess we need, are we doing call of the wards at a special? We're not.
And Madam Mayor, if I could maybe just take one additional moment. We could certainly do the kinds of things that have been talked about in order to get, I think, a finer point on the direction and the policies and procedures that you'd like. It will likely not happen as part of the budget. So what we could perhaps do is, bring you a budget that will fund the existing staff, but then take any budget for additional support, be it grants, loans, other matters, and put that aside until this process, which we probably could do in the first quarter of next year, happens. Would you prefer to do something like that versus putting together a shell? Because it would seem like the train analogy is a good one. We've been on a very, very fast train for a long period of time. My sense is if we slowed the train down just a little bit and had some of these other discussions, that might not be a bad thing, and then that our budgeting could reflect that. And then once, because obviously there's fund balance in the Economic Development Fund, the resources that we've been spending will be there, just unallocated. And perhaps we have these discussions in the first quarter of next year, then make those allocations. And if there are extraordinary circumstances that come along, then we can deal with those extraordinary circumstances as we come upon them. Would that make sense versus having, because I think it'd be difficult to have the budget discussion without having some of these other discussions, and looking at your calendar between now and Thanksgiving, I'm not quite sure where that would all fit. So if the council's amenable, we can come up with another slower strategy and then basically put off any additional investments, again, save for the extraordinary project.
Makes sense. Does that make sense to everyone? Alderman Rainey?
Well, I don't know if extraordinary translates to mean, the really big projects like big downtown, big Maine and Chicago. But my concern is that we always make a distinction between the projects that take place in tax increment financing districts and other projects, because that's why we establish the districts, so that things can happen rapidly, quickly, so that we can begin generating a huge increment, so at the end of the time, all the taxing bodies get lots of extra money. So I wouldn't want to see us put anything on hold or change our approach in those areas. Grants, we don't make that many grants there, but I think those projects should not be restricted in any way until some other time in the future, because that's why we establish the TIFs. We do a lot of thinking before we establish them. We establish them, and we expect things to go forward.
And Alderman Rainey, members of the council, I think that's a reasonable approach. One of the things we'll be talking to you about during the budget is the assessed valuation of the TIFs. Some of them have decreased, some of them have decreased sharply and are bringing less tax revenue to them. So I think as long as there's those conversations.
I mean, of course, that's
in the midst of that. So perhaps we would spend more of our economic development time through the budget process talking about our active TIFs and the budget implications there, so that everyone's in understanding and we can make adjustments accordingly. But to slow down perhaps some of the loans, some of the grants, some of the, we have issues we need to grapple with incubators and technology assistance, and I don't see easy answers to that absent this larger conversation. And I think it would be important for us to communicate that to some of our interested parties in this area, that come January 1st, the council will have to have that additional discussion before we'll be in any place to support some of those particular efforts, because I think those, tend to beget then other issues that I think is part of one of the council's conundrums is on how to spend the money. So if that sounds reasonable, we'll leave some flexibility to it. We'll continue to talk some more, but I think I'm getting a sense, and I'll look toward my colleagues in the audience. I think we have some direction here this evening, which we can continue to work on.
Alderman Holmes?
Well, I would not like for us to throw the baby out with the bathwater and forget about the grants. I think that grants may be very important in certain segments of the community and certain small businesses that, or entrepreneurs that we want to encourage. So I agree that we should look at more loans and for larger projects and maybe even for smaller ones, but I don't think that we should just not do grants. I think that is something that we need to keep on the table, so I'd like to discuss that more.
I agree with you completely.
And as do I, and I think what I've heard from some members of the council is that while we have tried to make that process more precise, that there's still room for improvement on the type of information, the data, that the impacts that the grants would have, and we can continue to work on that. And we can bring in other examples. We have looked at other communities up till now. We can continue to look at other communities. And I think that perspective is good on all sorts of levels as well.
Alderman Rainey.
Well, and when one of the most important part of the grants program, the facade improvement. I mean, those are very, very important. They enliven the street, they make things look better, and they're a morale booster. So I would hate to see that kind of grant program go away. And like Alderman Holmes said, sometimes the $2,000 and $3,000 grants are just really very important in some areas. So, I mean, I don't think we should throw anything out, but I think there definitely needs to be some kind of plan as to who gets grants and who gets loans.
Agreed.
I don't know what it is, but.
Alderman Wilson, I think we need a motion from you.
I have a motion pursuant to 5 Illinois compiled statutes ILCS 120/2A. I move that the City Council convene into executive session to discuss agenda items regarding personnel, collective bargaining, and minutes. These agenda items are permitted subjects to be considered in executive session, and there are enumerated exceptions under the Open Meetings Act. These exceptions are 5 ILCS 120/2A, C1, C2, and C21.
Been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? The ayes have it. Thank you, as usual, Alderman Wilson.
Okay, okay, no problem. It'll take us a couple minutes to. So while we were doing all this, the Preservation Commission on the building already. No, I sent Joe. That's where Joe's been all night. So Joe got them to fill out.
This one wanted all this bike stuff.
No, I'm not asking you to do anything.
And I said on September, listen, this is really, this should be it. I said, on September 30th at Bike the Ridge, the police are going to be there, the fire department's there, they do helmets, there's bike repairs there, there's all sorts of bike stores are going to be there. Women's rights back.